Chapter 1. 7-year-old Naruto laid on his back as the villagers punched, kicked, and did countless other things that could be called torture. He tried begging but to no avail as he took the beatings. He couldn't scream because he lost his voice. He heard a villager. Finally, we'll finish what the fourth Hokage started. He didn't understand what the man meant, but he wished for the pain to end. Suddenly a voice said, "I will end the pain for you, boy. But I need you to give me control and I'll end your suffering." Naruto didn't even think of the consequences as he hastily agreed. "Please end my pain. I will do anything, just end it." He didn't even register the voice starting to chuckle darkly as a malevolent red chakra began enveloping his body. Naruto's eyes changed to a red color and his pupils became slits as he let out a primal growl when the chakra started to whip around him violently. The villagers backed away with fear quickly growing inside them. Naruto dropped down to all fours, his blonde hair quickly changing to red, shadowing his face. He slowly lifted his face, showing off elongated fangs, and his whiskers started to darken as he growled at the villagers. One villager started to shake but managed to say, "Don't be afraid. The demon is just trying to intimidate us. Charge." As he ran towards Naruto, the villagers didn't follow because fear was completely gripping their actions. The man roared as he swung a punch towards the possessed boy, but Naruto caught the punch lazily. The man swung another punch, but Naruto caught that one too. The boy let out a dark chuckle that quickly evolved into a full-blown laugh as he glared at the man with an insane glint in his eyes. The man stared back and started to realize that maybe what he was doing was a huge mistake. He started to beg, "Please, I'm sorry. Please, spare me." Naruto sneered in disgust and said with venom in his voice, "I begged you for mercy, and I received none. So why should I show you any?" The man widened his eyes and Naruto smiled insanely as he let go of his fist and plunged his clawed hand into the man's chest. The man gasped hoarsely as he clawed at Naruto's torn clothes. Naruto grinned evilly as he felt the vestiges of the man's heart clenching erratically, spasming in the throes of the man's impending demise. He removed his hand and let the man slump to the floor. The villagers couldn't move because they were too scared. Naruto licked his hand clean of the blood and turned to the crowd and asked mockingly, "So who's next?" The villagers all gasped with fear and started to scream, and turned to run from the demon. Naruto just stared and lifted his hand, and suddenly a barrier of red chakra blocked the alleyway, allowing no one to come in or out. The villagers tried to bang on the barrier to try to catch someone's attention until Naruto chimed, "No one is coming." The shadow of the alleyway darkened his body, but his eyes seemed to glow with an unholy red in the shadows. Naruto grinned, showing fangs, and laughed insanely and cried out, "That's what makes this so amusing," and charged the crowd, fully intending to sate his thirst for the fool's blood. XXX. Sarutobi looked at Jiraiya, who was checking the seal that was glowing on Naruto, who was comatose. "So, did you find anything, Jiraiya?" Sarutobi asked, fearing the response that Jiraiya might give him. Jiraiya, after inspecting, gave off a heavy sigh and asked, "How long has Naruto been in a coma?" Sarutobi looked at Naruto and answered, "Almost 5 years now." Jiraiya scratched his head and responded, "So he's been in a coma-like state since he was 2, and he's still alive. This is almost impossible. His mind should have degenerated beyond repair by now. But what the nurse is saying is that he's completely healthy physically and mentally." Sarutobi widened his eyes and asked, "So the Kyuubi has something to do with this?" Jiraiya nodded his head solemnly and looked to Naruto. "Since Naruto has been unconscious for several years, and since I've dealt with Jinchuriki before, the demon would most probably lie in his subconscious. This means that it is almost certain that Naruto has met the Kyuubi," Jiraiya explained to Sarutobi, who looked at the boy with concern growing more explicit on his face. "So who knows what the Kyuubi has told Naruto? But I could guarantee it isn't anything good." Jiraiya rubbed his forehead in frustration and thought, "Damn it, Minato. Who would have thought that this would happen to your son?" XXX. Naruto stepped over the dead bodies and hummed happily as the Kyuubi still had control. The barrier was still erect as blood and various body parts stained and littered the walls and Naruto's clothing. Naruto stopped and used a claw to get a piece of bloody skin out of his teeth, remnants of a man's throat. He walked over a man who grabbed his ankle in a vice grip. Naruto turned to the man who was covered in scratches and the blood of the corpses around him. The man had tears in his eyes as he pleaded, "Please, save me. I have 2 daughters and a wife. Help me." Naruto only smiled darkly and grabbed the man's hair. The man struggled pathetically as Naruto pulled him up to eye level. Naruto lazily slit his throat with a swipe of his claw and dropped the body as the man tried to cover his throat in an attempt to stop the bleeding. He died quickly and Naruto simply giggled like a child who just got a treat. The Kyuubi chuckled in Naruto's mind and inwardly thought, "Everything is going according to plan. This boy was so easy to manipulate it's almost embarrassing." He looked outside his cage and saw the boy walking towards him. Naruto looked to the giant fox and thanked him. "You saved me again. I know it's embarrassing that I can't protect myself." The Kyuubi only smiled, showing his rows of sharpened teeth. "You will soon enough. But you've been hospitalized and you need to wake up," Kyuubi said, and Naruto nodded and asked, "Will you help me when I do?" The Kyuubi nodded his head and Naruto smiled, which Kyuubi hadn't seen in a while. Naruto disappeared from the sewer and the Kyuubi scoffed. "He trusts me completely. If I cared, I wouldn't want to manipulate him like this. Oh well, somebody should have told him to never trust a fox." The Kyuubi grinned evilly as he thought of the countless things that Naruto could do now that the fox had him in his clutches. XXX. It's been almost 5 years since Jiraiya inspected Naruto, and still Naruto hasn't shown much activity. Sarutobi stared at the boy and sighed heavily, thinking about what to do. The council has been hounding him about pulling the plug on the young Jinchuriki, but he couldn't find it in his heart to do it, but in the end he might need to do it. Naruto hasn't shown a hint of life in him, and if he was mentally dead, then there was no use. Sarutobi had tears in his eyes as he put his hand on Naruto's hand. Suddenly Naruto's hand grabbed Sarutobi's forcibly. Sarutobi grimaced, noticing the boy's vice grip, and asked, "Naruto?" Naruto's eyes suddenly opened and Sarutobi almost gasped. As Naruto's eyes were red and slitted, Naruto sat up and looked around the room, and when he turned to Sarutobi, his eyes flashed with so much anger and hatred that Sarutobi felt the need to turn away. "Jiji-san?" Naruto spat as he pulled the 4 lines off his arms and looked over himself. He seemed to smirk when he saw his claws that were growing. Suddenly, Naruto pounced towards the 3rd Hokage and roared. Sarutobi grabbed Naruto's arms and twisted them and grunted, "Naruto, what the hell is wrong with you?" Naruto struggled violently and opened his mouth to show elongated fangs and tried to bite the 3rd. The 3rd tried to keep Naruto in his grip, but he can slowly feel Naruto slipping from his hands. "Damn my old body," Sarutobi cursed as he continued to struggle against Naruto. Sarutobi saw multiple doctors and nurses coming in and tried to help him restrain the boy. Naruto felt more hands grab him and something snapped. He slipped from the old man and turned and snarled at the doctors and nurses and attacked them. Blood quickly splattered on the wall as Naruto tore into the crowd. Sarutobi looked at his surrogate grandson in horror as he cried out, "ANBU!" An almost immediately masked ninja appeared and tried to restrain the violent child. When the ANBU grabbed Naruto, he tried to attack them, but one of them grabbed the hilt of his blade and swiftly knocked him out. Naruto felt unconsciousness claim him as he slumped against the wall. The doctors and nurses looked at the boy with horror as scratches ran through their faces and arms. Sarutobi was at a loss of words as he stared disbelievingly at the small child. He then said, "Put him in a cell for now. I don't think it's safe to put him in another hospital room in case he attacks someone else." The ninja nodded and disappeared with the boy, leaving the doctors and nurses with Sarutobi. Sarutobi apologized to the doctors and nurses and left the room and decided that this was to be discussed by the council. XXX. Sarutobi groaned as he explained what happened at the hospital, and what the reaction was exactly what he expected from the council. Sum rubbed her head and asked, So what you're saying is that this boy attacked you after being in a coma for almost 11 years, and his earliest memory of you was at 2 years old? Sarutobi nodded yes, at the answer which earned a chuckle from the Inuzuka. I'm impressed. This kid sure knows how to hold a grudge. Shikaku groaned at her comment and responded, this is a very complicated situation, Sum. Your snide comments are not necessary. Which earned a growl from the Inuzuka clan head. Shikaku ignored her and turned to Sarutobi and asked, what happened? Sarutobi shook his head and answered, I wish I knew. All I know is that he woke up with the red slitted eyes, elongated fangs, and claws, which if I have to hazard a guess is his initial Jinchuriki form. Danzo narrowed his eyes and said, so is he under the control of the Kyuubi or not? Sarutobi shook his head and answered, I don't think so. If he was, he wouldn't have called me Gigi, which he used to call me when he was younger. Danzo responded, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, old friend. The demon could have used the term to taunt you, showing his control of the boy. I believe we should investigate the Jinchuriki further and maybe have a Yamanaka probe his mind to see what exactly was happening during his 11 years of his coma. Inoichi instantly protested. We already tried this, and the Kyuubi intercepted the last Yamanaka that tried, and he still hasn't recovered from the amount of mental damage he received. I will not allow another of my clan to fall victim of the Kyuubi if I could help it. Chusa Akimichi looked to Inoichi and said, so if a mind search won't work, should we have Ibiki interrogate him? Sarutobi shook his head immediately and said, that would be less than productive. If he's interrogated, it will just add on to the amount of hatred he seems to have for me. The clan heads looked to each other and no one wanted to ask the obvious question. Why did Naruto hate the third Hokage? What did Sarutobi do to the boy that warranted such hate? Now what I want to ask is, what should we do with him now that he's awake? I mean, we can't just put him in the academy, he would be severely behind. Sarutobi explained and everyone just shrugged. Danzo smiled inwardly, seeing an opportunity, and responded, how about I have the Jinchuriki be trained under me for a couple of months? Danzo suggested, seeing Sarutobi's reaction, and Danzo knew he had to word this properly. If we put him with me, I can have him trained enough in a couple of months to graduate with the graduating class in the academy. Sarutobi narrowed his eyes and asked, and what exactly would you have him learn? Danzo, mildly surprised that Sarutobi didn't explode with anger, answered, basically what the academy has been teaching the students, projectile training, taijutsu, ninjutsu, although I won't limit him to the trivial E-rank jutsu the teachers teach the students. Shikaku scratched his chin and said, I believe this is the best choice. Naruto is the Jinchuriki after all. The reason why he wasn't in the academy in the first place is because of the coma, which is now obviously Kyuubi-induced. We need him at least trained in case of an attack. Sarutobi rubbed his head in irritation at the lack of compassion for the boy. To just thrust him into training when he was just in a coma would have effects on the boy, this Sarutobi was sure of. But he couldn't just keep Naruto a civilian. Especially since before the coma, Naruto expressed deep interest in becoming a shinobi. Sarutobi sighed heavily and looked at Danzo. You will train him for the remainder of the academy before graduation. I will check on the training myself every 3 weeks. There will not be root training in his regimen, and if you even try to remove his emotions, you will be facing prison time. Do I make myself clear, Danzo? Danzo nodded, and even though his face showed nothing, deep down he was ecstatic. Sarutobi narrowed his eyes and said, this council meeting is adjourned. Danzo, Naruto is down in the cells below the tower. I wanted to keep him close without something happening. Danzo nodded and without another word disappeared in a swirl of leaves. XXX. Danzo walked through the darkened hall and stepped in front of a door. The 2 men standing guard said, I'm sorry, sir, but Hokage's orders. Nobody is allowed into this room. Danzo narrowed his eye in annoyance and said, Sarutobi has ordered for Naruto Uzumaki to be placed under my care under the duration of the remaining academy year. The 2 men looked at each other, unsure of what to do, until Danzo stated, you are going against the direct order of the 3rd Hokage. This is insubordination, and death is what is ahead of both of you." The two men moved instantly. They opened the door and Danzo walked inside without another word to the two. The door slammed behind him, and Danzo looked around the room, but the boy was nowhere in sight. Danzo reached for a kunai under his wrapped arm, and a guttural growl was heard from above him. With speed only a seasoned ninja could possess, Danzo turned and grabbed Naruto by the throat. Naruto snarled and tried to rip Danzo's throat. Danzo was surprised at the raw viciousness of this boy and tightened his grip around the boy's throat. Naruto's eyes rolled to the back of his head, and he stopped. Danzo threw him across the room and nearly bellowed, "That is enough, boy!" Naruto gripped his throat in pain and tried to laugh, but he was only able to cough. Danzo continued, "You have been ordered to be trained under my tutelage. Due to the village's need of a Jinchuriki, instead of you being a civilian, they have found another solution. Until the graduation of the students of the academy, I will train you extensively. You will learn the equivalent of the academy curriculum: taijutsu, ninjutsu, and projectile training. But unlike the academy, you will not learn that trash. Under me, you will learn all you can learn during the 7 months of which you will be trained." Naruto absorbed this information and nearly danced with glee. They were basically giving him the tools he needed to escape. The Kyuubi stated, "Be careful with this man. He is much more than he appears. If he even believes that you are a traitor, he will kill you." Naruto nodded inwardly and said to Danzo, "If you can teach me how to become a ninja, then I'm with you. But what will happen after the 7 months are over?" Danzo responded, "After these next 7 months you will take the academy graduation exam, and if you pass you will be named Genin, and with that you will join a team under a Jonin sensei." Naruto grinned darkly and said, "Excellent. Well, what are we doing standing here? Let's get started."
Danzo-sama.
Danzo narrowed his eye at the honorific and opened the door, letting Naruto go first. He, however, missed the claws growing slightly on Naruto's hands and the fangs growing slightly. Naruto chuckled darkly as he passed the two men, who shuddered, feeling the chill in their spine when the boy passed. Naruto thought, "This old guy's gonna be the first to die. I can't wait to feel his heart stop," and his eye widened in shock as I tear through his body. Naruto felt the Kyuubi chuckle and said, "Not dark enough, brat." It had been 6 months since Danzo first took the Jinchuriki under his wing. The first 3 months was spent teaching the kid how to read and write. Danzo had the urge to bash his skull in attempting to teach the kid how to read and write proper sentences. He finally managed to read most of what Danzo would give him. The reading material would usually be old mission directives. The 4th and 5th month was spent teaching the kid how to wield his chakra correctly. It was hard just to do that. This kid was insubordination reincarnate. Sarutobi checking in on the boy didn't make things easier. Danzo could feel the raw hatred coming from the boy whenever he was in the presence of the 3rd Hokage. The 6th month was used in projectile training and ninjutsu, which surprisingly he picked up fairly well. Danzo also spent the month having Naruto learn his affinity, which was fire and wind. Danzo was happy, although he didn't show it when he discovered this. The wind affinity was a rare affinity for someone to have. Naruto was currently running up a tree and failed again. Naruto's wardrobe has changed drastically. Before, he just had a white t-shirt and black pants. Now, instead of a white t-shirt, he wears a black tight-fitting t-shirt and wears black sleeves with metal arm protectors on them. He wears dark red pants with the pants' legs rolled up, revealing bandages that covered his ankles. He dyed his hair with red streaks, and his eyes were always red. He asked for a custom forehead protector, which he wore around his neck. The symbol engraved was the kanji symbol for red. Danzo watched the boy as he cursed loudly and ran up the tree once again. Danzo sighed heavily and said, "Your chakra reserves are too large, and the fact that you are adding too much chakra when you're running up is only making things worse." Naruto looked at Danzo and said, "I know that, but it's extremely hard to put so little if I have so much." Danzo looked thoughtful for a minute and responded, "Keep on practicing and I will bring something that should help you." Danzo nodded to a hidden ninja that was tasked with watching over Naruto. Danzo disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto hunched over, gasping heavily as the Kyuubi stated, "Your chakra reserves isn't helping over you in this situation. You need a way to restrain your chakra so you could control small bits of it." Naruto asked inwardly, "Do you think Danzo could help me with that? If he can, I could actually get started with learning to fight. After all, I only have 1 month of his training." Inside, the Kyuubi was reeling. He didn't think of the effects of after Naruto returned from the coma. Months that he could have spent training was wasted learning how to do something he should have learned. The Kyuubi couldn't escape just yet. If he wanted to, Naruto would have ripped the seal already and he would be free. But there was a problem. Even though the Kyuubi didn't want to admit it, he needed the brat to get rid of the third Hokage. The summoning of the Shinigami, if he broke free, was not something he wanted to be a factor should he find resistance. If that troublesome fourth Hokage knew it, then the third Hokage was sure to know it. For the time being, he needed Naruto to find information on whom exactly knew the jutsu. So far now, he would buy time and see who knew that accursed jutsu. Then he would manipulate the boy to slaughter each and every single one of them. The Kyuubi growled angrily and said, "Well, there's no point in practicing if there's no result. Practice your ninjutsu for now." Naruto nodded and walked over to a nearby tree which had a backpack which contained a lot of D-rank and C-rank wind and fire ninjutsu which Danzo gave Naruto to learn and practice. Naruto also conveyed with the Kyuubi when it came to the fire affinity. It turned out that the Kyuubi, although he was an entity entirely made of chakra, his affinity was fire. So Naruto managed to transform one of the fire-style jutsu and changed it. Naruto smiled impishly and went through the hand seals and inhaled a great flux of air and thought, "Fire style, great fox fire," and blew flames out of his mouth. The flames briefly transformed into what seemed like a group of blazing foxes running, and the flames slowly burned out. Naruto watched the flames burn out with an unholy gleam in his eyes and nodded approvingly. He breathed again and went through another set of hand seals and thought, "Fire style, great fireball jutsu," and breathed a large fireball into a tree, quickly incinerating the tree. He grabbed shurikens out of his pouch hanging on his waist, and almost expertly threw them into a tree. As they connected, Naruto already went through another set of hand seals and covered his hands with wind chakra. Knowing he wouldn't be able to hold it for long, he slashed horizontally, and the wind shot towards the tree and cut into the tree deeply, causing several of the shurikens to fall. Naruto didn't falter as another set of hand seals were completed, and he breathed in yet another flux of air, and thought, "Fire style, fiery fox's comet," and breathed out little fireballs that were shaped into little foxes. The foxes shot towards another tree and connected, causing little burns on the tree. The masked ninja who was tasked with watching him was slightly impressed with the young Jinchuriki. In rapid succession, this kid was able to do several fire jutsu, one wind jutsu, and managed to throw shurikens as well. Naruto now was breathing heavily as he looked at his handiwork. Several trees were either burning or completely incinerated. Naruto, even though he knew he was probably going to get in trouble, he couldn't help but smile. He was growing stronger, just like that old man had said. He was closer to leaving and getting his revenge. Danzo suddenly appeared in a swirl of leaves beside Naruto. He looked around to see several trees burning and simply said, "I'm glad that you have been practicing." Naruto only nodded, only managing to hide his hatred. Danzo opened a scroll that he had in his hands and pulled out 2 papers with writing inscribed on them. Naruto, from what he read, identified these pieces of papers as seals. Naruto was instantly on guard, having first-hand experience with seals and what they did. Naruto asked cautiously, "What are those for?" Danzo furrowed his brow and answered, "These are chakra restraining seals. Since your reserves are so vast, these will restrain them so you can use your chakra in small bursts and your chakra control will be much better." Naruto looked at the seals warily as the Kyuubi smirked inwardly while saying, "I don't think I need to tell you to be careful with this man and these seals. They might have a secondary function that he doesn't want you to know about." Naruto nodded and took the seals. He looked it over and asked, "How would I use them?" "They would have to be applied to main parts where you direct your chakra towards. That's why I have a second pair of seals, since you would be using chakra in your hands and feet. I want you to remember that these seals are primarily used for chakra control. These seals are used for ninja with abnormally large chakra reserves, Danzo answered. Naruto nodded, absorbing the information, and placed the first pair on his arms. The seals being placed on his arm suddenly glowed an icy blue before returning to the black inscriptions. Naruto grabbed the second pair from Danzo and placed the seals on his lower calves. The seals changed to an icy blue and returned to the black inscriptions. Naruto turned to a tree and directed chakra to his feet. Instantly he felt a difference and attempted to walk on the tree. The chakra amount was vastly different, and Naruto was able to walk to the top of the tree and pulled a kunai out of his pouch. He drove it into the top branch and with a back flip, launched himself off the tree. He landed gracefully on his feet and couldn't help but laugh. The chakra control problem was solved just like that. Naruto looked at Danzo and smiled toothily and said, "Thanks. This is exactly what I need." Danzo only nodded and put the scroll away. Danzo said, "The last month will be me teaching you taijutsu. You will learn a more advanced version of the Academy's taijutsu. I've noticed when you first came under my tutelage and when you attacked me that first day." Naruto laughed, sheepishly remembering that day clearly. Danzo continued, "You used your claws to attack me, so I will be centering your training on your claws. You've led me to believe that you can use them whenever you want." Danzo continued when he seen Naruto nod in confirmation. "Excellent, you will train with me and my root and we will conduct training sessions, and I believe you will be ready for your exam." Naruto nodded, smiling darkly as he thought of finally becoming a shinobi. XXX. The 7 months of training that Naruto had undergone was finally over. Naruto was now in front of the academy on a tree branch. H watched the kids who were just coming in and watched as their parents wished them luck. Naruto scoffed, disgusted at the pampered kids. He looked at the kids and noticed a boy standing by himself isolated. Naruto leapt towards the boy using the trees. When he was directly above him, he jumped down, surprising the kid. Naruto smiled and said, "I'm Naruto Uzumaki. What's your name?" The kid had surprised marked on his face as he answered, "I'm Sasuke Uchiha. I've never seen you before. Are you here to take the exam?" Naruto nodded. "I've been hospitalized for a long time. To make up for lost time and to qualify me to become a genin, I was trained by a man appointed by the third Hokage." Naruto said the last part with venom. Sasuke noted the last part and nodded. "I see. Well, I hope you're good. I don't know if you know, but we're going to be on teams or squads. I don't know about you, but I don't want any weak people on my squad." Naruto nodded in agreement and responded, "I can tell most of these kids are weak, some of them disgustingly so, but I would love to spar you. You seem at least competent." Sasuke smiled wryly and countered, "You could spar me any time, but you might just find yourself hospitalized again." Naruto's smile grew wider and said, "Bring it any time, Uchiha." Sasuke nodded, smiling, and walked towards the academy entrance. Naruto looked at Sasuke and heard the Kyuubi say, "What the hell was that? You're befriending people now." Naruto shook his head and responded, "He's isolated. That means that he's unlike any of these other idiots. Who knows? Maybe he might be an asset I can use." The Kyuubi growled inwardly, not liking the fact he befriended an Uchiha. The Kyuubi said, "What happens when you take your revenge? Will you spare him?" Naruto shook his head and scoffed at the idea. "Nobody escapes my vengeance. Not even this kid, as highly amusing he might be," Naruto answered. The Kyuubi accepted the answer, annoyed still. He couldn't have the Uchiha fledgling as a factor. If Naruto had this kid as a friend and later betrayed him, he could use the kid's Sharingan as a way to control him. Naruto walked towards the academy door, ignoring the many stares he was receiving, kid and parent alike. One parent he heard murmur, "Is he that kid? The demon?" Another parent nudged him on the shoulder, stopping his sentence. Naruto growled angrily and felt his nails sharpen until he took a deep breath. He simply looked forward and retracted his nails. He walked through a corridor and stopped after realizing he had no idea where he was exactly going. He reached into his pocket and looked for the note that Danzo had given him when he said his goodbye. He found it and said, "The third floor, room 3F. He walked to the end of the corridor and walked up the nearby staircase. XXX. The kids in the classroom were all talking cheerfully, happy that they were finally graduating. Sasuke Uchiha was sitting by himself by the window wondering about that kid that he met outside. He seemed that he was a competent fighter even though he was hospitalized for a long time. Sasuke smiled, remembering the kid's comment about the kids and how they were weak. The kid couldn't have been more on the mark. Some of the people here were somewhat competent, but most of them were pathetic. His thought process was interrupted by a loud, "Sasuke, aren't you just glad we're graduating?" Sasuke groaned as he turned to see the pink-haired girl bothering him once again. What was her name again? He was pretty sure it was Sakura something. He turned back to the window and tried his best to ignore her. Then the blonde girl arrived and quickly a shouting match occurred over who was going to sit next to him. He tried desperately to tune the both of them out, but their voices were like nails on a chalkboard. Irika walked into the classroom and rolled his eyes seeing Ino and Sakura fighting again over Sasuke. He cleared his throat and bellowed, "Sit down now!" The effect was instantaneous as everybody grew quiet and quickly ran to their seats. Even Ino and Sakura forgot about who was going to sit next to Sasuke and sat down. Irika smiled inwardly knowing he was going to miss these kids. He clapped his hands together and said, "You guys are finally graduating. After today, many of you will be on the road to becoming genin. I'm so proud of all of you and I." His speech was interrupted when he heard a knock on the classroom door. The kids and Irika turned to the door when a kid with blonde spiky hair with red streaks came in. He looked around and Irika caught the sneer on his face. The kid drawled, "Is this the graduating class of this year? If so, I'm supposed to be here to take the exam." Irika was about to respond when Kiba said loudly, "That's not fair, Irika-sensei. We're here for the 4 years needed to graduate. Why does he get special treatment?" Naruto rolled his eyes and handed a note that he pulled from his back pocket to Irika. Irika took it and opened the contents and widened his eyes in shock. He looked at Naruto and stammered, Take a seat, Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto bowed in mock respect and walked to the seat near Sasuke and sat down, getting glares from most of the girls in the class. Naruto smiled at Sasuke and said, "So it seems we meet again, Uchiha." Sasuke looked at Naruto and smiled much to the shock of many of his classmates. "It would seem so, Uzumaki. I have to say I didn't think you were actually going to be in this class for your graduation." Naruto looked around and sneered at the classmates much to the anger of kids like Kiba. Irika saw the exchange between Naruto and Sasuke, and to say he was surprised was an understatement. Sasuke was a loner, to put it simply. Throughout the years that Irika was teaching the young Uchiha, he had never seen the young boy communicate with any one of his classmates. Irika cleared his thoughts, remembering he still had to administer the exam, and cleared his throat and said, "All right, the exam will begin. The names will be called out alphabetically." Naruto turned to Sasuke, not having to worry about his name getting called for a while. "So give me the details on the kids in here." Sasuke looked at Naruto for a minute and turned to the back and nodded towards the chubby kid eating chips, and the kid who was nodding off. The chubby one is Chuji Akimichi, and the other one napping is Shikamaru Nara. Chuji Akimichi's clan uses body expansion jutsu. They are considered powerhouses. Shikamaru Nara's clan uses shadows to stop their enemies' movements. Naras are known to be incredibly smart, but lazy. Their clans are famous for their Ino Shikacho formation. Sasuke turned to Ino and said, "Ino Yamanaka. Her clan is famous for their mind penetration jutsu." Naruto narrowed his eyes at the mention of the Yamanaka and wrote a mental note to be extra careful around the Yamanaka. Sasuke turned to Kiba and his dog and stated, "Kiba Inuzuka. His clan is known for using ninja dogs as companions. They have a cute sense of smell, much like their canine companions, and enhanced hearing." Kiba saw Sasuke and Naruto staring and decided to confront them. Naruto grinned, sensing a confrontation, and watched as Kiba came up to him. Kiba said loudly, "Look, I don't care if you have special permission to be here. You aren't about to come in here as if you're some big shot." Naruto chuckled darkly and got up so he was face to face with Kiba. His eyes seemed to glow as he said, "It seems as if you're trying to assert your dominance here, Kiba. If a fight is what you're looking for, then I'll have to indulge you." His claws were sharpened as he wrapped his hand around Kiba's throat. He lifted Kiba up into the air and laughed darkly and said, "You couldn't even defend yourself. How do you expect to beat me?" The students gasped watching the exchange, and some feared that Kiba went too far. Akamaru barked, fearing for his master, and bit Naruto's leg. Naruto growled in pain and threw Kiba backwards and turned his attention to Akamaru. He swiftly ripped the mutt from the ground and said angrily, "You stupid little shit." Naruto pulled his claws back and went to drive them through the mutt when someone grabbed his arm. Naruto turned to see Sasuke gripping his arm tightly while shaking his head. Kiba looked at Naruto fearfully as Akamaru struggled under Naruto's tight grip. Naruto scoffed and dropped Akamaru while saying, "Keep away from me, Kiba, or next time either you or your mutt won't survive the encounter." Naruto didn't register the many fearful stares he was getting as he sat back down. Sasuke sat back next to him and looked at the window, feeling awkward. Sakura looked at Kiba and decided to speak up. "Who do you think you are? We'll all know Kiba could be a jerk sometimes, but you didn't have to go after Akamaru." Naruto rolled his eyes and countered, "Since it's obvious you weren't paying attention, Kiba came to me and tried to intimidate me and failed miserably. He doesn't know me, and he doesn't know that I have no problem killing him." Sakura gasped at the dark tone in his voice and backed away. Naruto smirked coldly and continued, "I didn't come here to make friends, and I have no wish to deal with you idiots and your ridiculous insecurities. His pathetic attempt to intimidate me was met with how I operate, and if any of you try to do what he just attempted, you will meet my hand going through your chest." The students had horror etched on their faces as they heard Naruto's declaration. Naruto sneered and walked back to his seat. Not wanting to deal with them anymore, he put his head down and rested. His anger was rising dangerously. "How dare that little bitch? She saw what happened and still came after me. Pathetic little cretin. I swear if I could, I would tear her throat out." 30 minutes pasted before Naruto looked up, groggily swearing. He heard his name being called. Irika looked at him, waiting for him. Naruto shook his head and got up, ignoring the stares he was getting. He followed Irika into the corresponding room and walked into a large room, and the end of it had a desk with dozens of headbands that had the leaf symbol on them. Another man was in the room. The man had shoulder-length white hair and wore the standard attire of Konoha ninja. Irika pointed to Mizuki and said, "Naruto, this is Mizuki, my assistant instructor. He will along with me decide whether you are worthy to become a genin." Naruto noticed the stare that Mizuki was giving him, and quickly decided he didn't like this man. He waited for Irika and Mizuki to sit down, and Naruto moved to the center and asked, "So what exactly are you going to be testing me on?" Irika answered, "Well, since I know about your situation, I can't really have you tested on the regular curriculum. So show us what you can do exactly." Naruto grinned ferally, which sent a chill down Irika's spine. He went through hand seals and thought, "Fire style, great fox fire," and flaming foxes ran circles around Naruto. Mizuki reached for a kunai, but was stopped by Irika. The foxes disappeared, and Irika said, "All right, it seems you know ninjutsu, but how is your projectile throwing?" With that, a training dummy appeared in front of Naruto. Naruto swiftly reached a hand into his pouch and with precision threw 3 shuriken. They cut deep in the dummy, and Irika got up and inspected the dummy. He widened his eyes in surprise and thought, the places he threw the shuriken at were instant kills. This kid knows his way around the human body. Irika shook his head and said, "All right, I've seen enough. So what do you think, Mizuki?" Mizuki clenched his fists in anger and thought, how can the brat be this good? It's not like I can fail him. Then Irika will suspect. He smiled a false smile and said, "He is good. He would make a fine ninja. Irika nodded in agreement while Naruto narrowed his eyes as he watched Mizuki. He knew by the stare that Mizuki held contempt towards him. So why was he pretending? Irika grabbed a headband and presented it to Naruto. Naruto grabbed it and walked out of the room without another word to Irika. Naruto heard groans when he came out with the headband. Honestly, he couldn't care less. They were all trash compared to him. Naruto looked at Sasuke, who seemed to look at him with approval. Naruto nodded towards Sasuke and walked out of the room. He stopped and looked at the headband and snarled, knowing he was going to have to wear the blasted thing. He groaned loudly and took of his custom headband and put it in his back pocket. He reluctantly tied the headband around his neck. Naruto thought, well, my revenge is officially starting. As the Kyuubi said, no, our revenge starts now. Naruto smiled evilly, anticipating the next couple of months. Naruto walked out of the academy as the sun shined on his headband. He was considering training some more when he heard a voice. Uzumaki, wait up. I need you for something. Naruto turned around to see Mizuki running up to him. Naruto groaned inwardly and asked, what do you need, Mizuki? Mizuki smiled and answered, do you know that there is a secondary mission for students that have appeared more advanced than the others? Naruto raised his eyebrow, intrigued by this information, and said, how come my sensei never told me about it? Naruto looked amused, watching Mizuki's bewildered face, knowing he was caught. Mizuki regained his composure and responded, he probably didn't know about this certain mission, probably because the Hokage has only told the academy instructors. Naruto scoffed, inwardly doubting Danzo didn't know everything that needed to be known about the Leaf Village. He asked anyway, so what is this top-secret mission? Mizuki answered, the mission is designed to see how you are during a stealth mission. The mission is to sneak in the Hokage's office and retrieve a scroll full of forbidden jutsu, and to avoid detection and bring it to me. Naruto widened his eyes in surprise, clearly not expecting that, when the Kyuubi said, take this mission. If you gain that scroll, those forbidden jutsu could be ours for the taking. Naruto smiled, evilly thinking of the damage he could do with an arsenal of forbidden jutsu. He smiled brightly and said, wow, my very first mission. Don't worry about a thing, Mizuki-sensei. I will bring this scroll to you without being detected. Mizuki nodded and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto dropped his smile and asked, so how is that? Too enthusiastic? The Kyuubi snorted and answered, too enthusiastic and too sweet sounding. Naruto chuckled at the statement and was about to walk away when he heard a voice calling him. Naruto, wait up. Naruto groaned, annoyed by all the interruptions, when he turned to see Sasuke running towards him. Naruto raised his eyebrow and asked, what do you want? Sasuke? I'm really busy with something right now. Sasuke smirked and said, I want to spar with you. Unless you took my advice to the heart and decided not to fight me unless you'll end up in the hospital. Naruto briefly remembered the challenge and smiled darkly, feeling an urge to fight. Naruto responded, no, I believe it will be you who will be put in the hospital. You remember what I did to Kiba? That was nothing compared to what I'll do to you. Sasuke only smirked confidently and countered, you'll find that I won't be so easy to beat. Kiba is nothing compared to me. Naruto's smile grew wider and he leapt onto a tree and jumped from branch to branch. Sasuke followed suit, guessing that Naruto was going to a training ground. Triple X. Sasuke was hunched over on a tree branch, trying desperately to catch his breath. Claw marks were on his face, arms, and back. His shirt was tattered and his pants were burned. He looked around frantically, trying to find that animal. He was training with him for an hour, but it felt longer. He thought he was safe until he saw those eyes, the crimson eyes. Naruto chuckled darkly and said, are you getting tired, Uchiha? Sasuke growled and threw shuriken in his direction and ran. As he leapt from tree branch to tree branch, he wondered, this kid isn't even tired. He hasn't taken one breather since we started. He's relentless. His thought process was interrupted with an abrupt kick to his temple. Sasuke felt immeasurable pain as he plummeted to the ground. Sasuke hit the ground with force as Naruto dived towards him. Sasuke recovered quickly and back-flipped, barely dodging Naruto's attack. Naruto didn't relent as he swiped after Sasuke. Sasuke gritted in pain as Naruto's claws connected, drawing blood. Naruto got more excited at the sight of the Uchiha's blood, and his attacks grew more ferocious and deadly. He started to go for Sasuke's jugular and his chest. Sasuke noticed the change in his attack and grew fearful. Sasuke said, "Naruto, stop, that's enough." Naruto didn't even bat an eyelash as he continued to attack. Sasuke growled and went through hand seals and thought, "Fire style, great fireball jutsu," and blew an impressive fireball at Naruto. Naruto grinned evilly and was consumed by the fireball. Sasuke backed away from the fireball and started to breath heavily. He said out loud, "What the hell is wrong with him?" He started to go crazy. He widened his eyes when a malevolent chakra suddenly hit him like a wave. He turned fearfully as the fire started to flare violently. The fire then shaped into a giant fox's face, and it grinned darkly. A voice came from the fire. "Did you honestly think that this pitiful fire would stop me?" Suddenly Naruto was in front of him, and for the second time in his life Sasuke was scared for his life. Naruto's hair was wilder than before, and fangs were protruding from his mouth. Naruto growled ferally and asked, "Are you scared of me, Uchiha? I can see the despair in your eyes, and it gives me great pleasure." Naruto grabbed Sasuke and Sasuke was too scared to move. Naruto lifted Sasuke up and lifted his hand up and moved it towards Sasuke's heart. Sasuke widened his eyes knowing what Naruto was going to do, and struggled against his firm grip. Naruto's smile grew wider at the sign of his struggle and laughed insanely as he moved to plunge his hand in Sasuke's chest. A hand suddenly grabbed Naruto's arm and forcibly threw Naruto away. Naruto quickly recovered and growled, his bloodthirst growing ever stronger. He grinned when he saw Danzo watching him cautiously. Danzo said, "Naruto, that is enough. You need to gain control now, or I will be forced to put you down." Naruto laughed and went down in all fours, resembling an animal. He said, "Try it, old man," and with that appeared in front of Danzo. Danzo didn't even bat an eye as he dodged Naruto's onslaught. Danzo disappeared and appeared behind Naruto and with concentrated wind chakra said, "Wind style vacuum wave," and blew a wave of wind that shot towards Naruto. Naruto dodged the wave of wind, but was quickly grabbed by Danzo. Danzo quickly uncovered his eye, revealing his Sharingan. Naruto widened his eyes in shock and struggled against Danzo. Danzo winced slightly as Naruto's clawed hand stabbed at his side. Danzo used a genjutsu against the young Jinchuriki, which caused Naruto to fall unconscious. Danzo sighed as he dropped Naruto and turned towards Sasuke, who still had a look of pure fear on his face. Danzo walked towards Sasuke and said, "Naruto is a dangerous individual. He told you that he was hospitalized. The reason was because his mentality is broken. He is the equivalent of an insane patient in an asylum. He is a bloodthirsty, insane boy, and he takes great pleasure in killing and bringing pain to others." Sasuke widened his eyes in shock and asked, "Well, what is he doing out then?" Danzo answered unemotionally, "He is out because he is needed." Without another word, Danzo grabbed Naruto and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Sasuke was still in shock and thought, "He's needed for what? What can he possibly be needed for? If he is what he just said he was, what do they need him for?" Triple X. Naruto woke up groggily to find Danzo staring at him. Naruto groaned loudly and commented, "So is there a reason as to why you're staring at me like that?" Danzo responded, "You lost control to the Kyuubi again." Naruto scoffed and shook his head in disagreement. Danzo narrowed his eye and continued, "You didn't lose control. You were in control of your actions, weren't you?" Naruto grinned evilly and answered, "We got a winner." Danzo grabbed Naruto by the throat and squeezed. Naruto's smile only grew wider as he said, "I wanted to see what the Uchiha was capable of. He's immature and I taught him that his enemy won't stop when he begs for them to." Danzo squeezed harder and said, "You weren't going to stop, and we both know that for a fact. Naruto didn't even flinch as Danzo's grip tightened as he said, I knew someone was going to save the last Uchiha. Danzo growled, showing emotions that he normally didn't show. He let go of Naruto and said, the third Hokage has heard of this incident and with the council as demanded to see you. Naruto growled inwardly and asked, is this even necessary? I didn't even kill him. Danzo's face gave him the answer as he groaned loudly while getting up while saying, let's get this over with. Triple X. Sarutobi watched as Naruto walked in with Danzo behind him. The council heard of the incident between Naruto and Sasuke and decided to deal with this before the Jinchuriki got out of control. Sarutobi eyed Naruto and asked the boy, Naruto Uzumaki, do you know why you're here today? Naruto shrugged and said darkly, I'm here because me and Sasuke were fighting and allegedly I lost control. But you and me both know that isn't the case. Shikaku narrowed his eyes at the comment and said, are you saying that you were in control when you tried to kill Sasuke Uchiha? Naruto looked at the Nara clan head and chuckled evilly. Of course I was, but I didn't try to kill him. I tried to show him that his enemies are merciless, and they won't stop. If my hand accidentally drove into his chest, then it would be my bad. Naruto watched as the clan heads all looked at each other in alarm. Sarutobi sighed and said, Naruto, you need to see the gravity of your actions. If nobody was there, you could have killed Sasuke. Sarutobi almost teared up when he saw Naruto shrug absent-mindedly. Hisashi Hyuga said, this boy cares not for attempting to kill another leaf ninja. This calls for punishment short of death. I say let the boy rot in prison. Sum nodded in agreement, disgusted by the boy's actions. Chuza looked at the boy uncomfortably and commented, it's clear that the boy is troubled, but I don't believe that he was in control no matter what he says. Please consider that he's been in the Kyuubi's mercy since he was 2. Of course, some of the characteristics of the Kyuubi would rub off on him. Shibi nodded and said unemotionally, I agree with Chuza. If the Kyuubi had access to Naruto's mind during the 10 years that Naruto was in a coma, we can't tell what the Kyuubi has done. It might be the Kyuubi we're talking to right now. His comment got everyone on edge as they turned to Naruto fearfully. Even Danzo looked at Naruto cautiously. Naruto didn't say anything as he looked at each person in the room. Then suddenly he laughed uproariously. He grabbed his sides as he laughed, not even caring that he was in the presence of several clan heads and the Hokage. He said while still laughing, the Kyuubi doesn't have control of me. You must be stupid to think otherwise. The Kyuubi is caged unless I say so. Naruto suddenly stopped laughing and said darkly, the 4th Hokage made sure of that. The people in the room winced hearing about their late Hokage. Sarutobi narrowed his eyes and thought, how much do you know about the 4th Hokage, Naruto? Naruto scratched the back of his head and said, well, I guess that now you know that I don't play with others. So what are you going to do? I know you clan heads have kid, and you don't want to risk your kid's safety should they be paired up with me. The faces of the clan heads gave away their concern for their kids as Naruto said, so what will become of little old me? Danzo decided to come in. I believe that Naruto should stay and train with me. Since the clan head will not risk their kid's safety, I believe the best option would have Naruto train with me. When the exam starts, he will have a temporary team, and after the exam, he will continue to train with me. The clan heads stared at each other and nodded in agreement to Danzo's request. Everybody turned to Sarutobi for they needed his consent. Naruto smirked inwardly and thought, come on old man, do it. Sarutobi looked at each of the clan heads and he looked at Danzo. He sighed heavily and said, I guess I have no choice. Danzo, your request is accepted. You will train Naruto. The clan heads nodded, glad that their children were safe. Danzo nodded and grabbed Naruto by the shoulder and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Triple X. Danzo and Naruto appeared in the Root HQ. Danzo turned to Naruto and said, you planned that, didn't you? Naruto smiled sweetly and answered, I have no idea of what you're talking about. He turned around and walked away from Danzo. Danzo let a small smile edge on his face as he thought, that kid is going to be dangerous. A worthy ninja. Triple X. Naruto was on the Hokage mountain on the fourth Hokage's face as he waited for the sun to disappear. He wore a black cloak that covered his entire body and a hood that covered his head, and a mask that covered the lower half of his face. A scroll was strapped to his back, which was needed for what he was going to do. When the last rays of light disappeared, Naruto smirked evilly as he leapt down onto the Hokage tower. As he landed on the Hokage tower, he ran to the edge and jumped. He maneuvered so he landed on the windowsill of the Hokage's office. He smirked confidently when he saw the window was open. Too easy, he thought as he jumped into the Hokage's office. Naruto looked around and saw that nobody was in the office. He crept along until he saw a giant bookshelf and a scroll at the bottom. He pulled the scroll out and grinned when he saw the kanji symbol for forbidden. Naruto, hearing footsteps, ran towards the window and jumped out. He leapt to a nearby branch and opened the scroll. A list of jutsu was printed in the scroll, jutsu that he didn't know even existed. The Kyuubi said, "Make a list of it before you give it to that man." Naruto nodded as he leapt to a nearby alley. He pulled out the scroll on his back and opened it, revealing it to be empty, except for a pen that was in it. Naruto smirked and chuckled evilly as he wrote down the jutsu. Triple X. Mizuki sat in the forest impatiently as he waited for the Kyuubi brat to come with his scroll. He sensed somebody coming and grabbed a kunai just in case. He relaxed when he saw Naruto grinning while waving a scroll. Mizuki smiled a fake smile and said, "Well, congratulations, Naruto, you passed. Now all you need to do is give me the scroll." Mizuki walked to Naruto and reached his hand out. Naruto smiled evilly and with a flash plunged his clawed hand through Mizuki's chest. Mizuki widened his eyes in shock as he violently coughed up blood. "What are you doing?" Mizuki weakly asked as he dropped down to his knees. Naruto lazily clawed Mizuki's throat, splattering blood all over. Mizuki grabbed at his throat and dropped to the ground. Naruto said, "Did you honestly think I was stupid enough to believe you?" He wiped the blood of his hand with his pants and continued, "A mission for advanced genin, what a stupid lie." Naruto watched emotionlessly as blood poured out of Mizuki's open chest. He leapt on a tree branch and left, leaving Mizuki's broken body on the floor. Triple X. Sarutobi paced his room back and forth as he waited for word from his ANBU. He still couldn't believe that the scroll of forbidden jutsu was stolen from right under his nose. A knock on the door brought Sarutobi back to earth as he said impatiently, "Yes, yes. Come in." To say he was surprised to see Naruto come in was an understatement. Naruto reached towards his back and pulled out a scroll. He handed it to the third and said, "Mizuki tried to get me to give it to him. Told me it was an advanced mission for advanced genin." Sarutobi looked at the scroll in shock and said, "Where is Mizuki now?" Naruto smirked and answered coldly, "Dead in the forest. He tried to forcibly take it from me. He met a slow and painful death." Sarutobi closed his eyes and sighed heavily. "All right, you are dismissed, Naruto." Naruto bowed mockingly and walked out. Sarutobi said, "Mouse." A masked ninja appeared instantly and bowed. Sarutobi continued, "Follow him." The ninja bowed and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Triple X. Naruto was in his apartment as he eyed the scroll hungrily as he looked through the copy. He saw the Shikifujin and grinned demonically as the Kyuubi said, "That's it. The jutsu that defeated me." Naruto nodded and looked through the rest and stopped when he saw the Kage Bunshin jutsu. Naruto read the description and pointed while saying, "This is it, the alternative to the Bunshin jutsu." Naruto closed the scroll after looking at the seals and stored it in the dresser. He walked out while the Kyuubi asked, "Where are you going?" Naruto grinned and answered, "To see a friend." Triple X. Sasuke Uchiha walked towards the Uchiha district. He had been training since the incident with Naruto. He hated to admit, but Naruto was stronger and he had the nerve to kill. Sasuke didn't have that. So he started to train in hopes that he would get stronger and maybe gain the same nerve. As Sasuke neared his house, he felt a chill go down his spine. Sasuke turned to see Naruto staring at him with those red eyes. Sasuke froze up, not expecting Naruto to be back. Sasuke asked fearfully, "What do you want, Naruto?" The only answer he got was a smile, that same smile that he had on when he tried to kill him. Naruto said, "Nothing much really, Uchiha. I just wanted to talk to you. Alone." With that, his fangs elongated. Sasuke backed away and asked, "What do you want to talk to me about?" Naruto answered, "I feel that you can be a worthy foe, but you lack the resolve needed. I'm here to give it to you." Sasuke felt sweat pour down his face as he asked, "And how are you planning to do that?" This was met with claws scraping his throat as Naruto smiled darkly. Naruto said simply, "By killing you, of course." And with that, Naruto backed away as his chakra flared violently. With a guttural roar, Naruto lunged at Sasuke. Naruto sat down, lazily tuning out Iruka's speech. It seemed that Iruka had been crying the other night. He probably heard about Mizuki's fate. He smirked, remembering the night before and Mizuki's dumbfounded face as he died. Naruto turned to Sasuke and whispered, "So do you get what I'm trying to tell you?" Sasuke nodded and turned to the window. Flashback. Naruto lunged at Sasuke, and Sasuke barely dodged the attack. Sasuke gritted his teeth and ran down the alley. Naruto sighed in annoyance and said loudly, "Running won't get you anywhere. I'll find you in the end." And he gave chase. Sasuke ran towards his house and looked back to see nothing. He stopped for a second and looked around, trying to find the crazy kid. He froze when he heard a voice say, "Looking for me?" Sasuke turned to see Naruto staring at him and smiling insanely. Sasuke backed up and went through hand seals, fire style, great fireball jutsu, and blew a gigantic fireball which launched towards Naruto. Naruto, using chakra, jumped over the fireball and landed behind Sasuke. Naruto charged Sasuke and went for his throat. Sasuke swapped his hand away and threw a punch. Naruto let the punch connect and kicked towards Sasuke's stomach. Sasuke dodged but realized too late that it was a feint as Naruto's fist connected to his temple. Sasuke hunched over but quickly recovered as he blocked another punch. Naruto grinned and backed away before going through hand seals, fire style, great fireball jutsu. A fireball torpedoed towards Sasuke. Sasuke quickly went through the same hand seals and blew a fireball that clashed against Naruto's fireball. The resulting explosion caused smoke to cover the area. Sasuke tried to peer through the smoke and dodged barely as Naruto launched towards him. Naruto flew past him and landed on all fours. He growled and turned around and looked at Sasuke and said, "You're doing pretty well, but let's stop playing around." Sasuke gasped heavily and thought, "He's been playing around?" and prepared himself as Naruto tensed up, showing he was going to attack soon. Naruto smirked and disappeared. Sasuke growled and turned to see Naruto going through hand seals and blew tiny flaming foxes that charged towards him. Sasuke grabbed shuriken from his pouch and threw them. The foxes simply devoured the shuriken and continued to advance towards Sasuke. Sasuke dodged the foxes and charged Naruto. Naruto smirked, seeing Sasuke take the offensive, and prepared himself. Sasuke pulled out a kunai, and right when he was going to attack, he disappeared and reappeared behind Naruto. Naruto quickly turned and grabbed Sasuke's arm. Sasuke grinned and revealed an explosion tag he had in his hand, and it was lit. Naruto widened his eyes as the small explosion consumed them both. Sasuke revealed himself behind a building when he replaced himself with a nearby garbage can. He grinned and boasted, "You beat me last time, but that was when I underestimated you. That won't happen again." Sasuke prepared himself when he heard Naruto chuckle darkly as he said, "You're right, it won't happen again." The flames cleared to see Naruto wiping flames off his shoulder. His skin was badly burned, but it was healing by the second. Sasuke widened his eyes in surprise as Naruto continued to heal himself. His clothes couldn't be saved as burn marks, and holes were all over his clothes. His shirt was mostly burned off and his pants had burns all over. Naruto clapped slowly and said, That was a brilliant move, Uchiha. You seem to surprise me more and more. His red eyes seemed to glow as he regarded Sasuke and continued, now it's time for me to get serious. Without another word, he disappeared and reappeared behind Sasuke. Sasuke didn't have time to register what happened before it happened. He turned and felt immeasurable pain as Naruto ripped into his chest. Blood splattered over Naruto, and Naruto grabbed Sasuke by his throat and lifted him up. Sasuke unsuccessfully tried to free himself from Naruto's grip. Naruto said, "You still thought you had a choice against me. Our first spar should have told you different." Sasuke tried to breathe as he felt Naruto's hand squeezing his windpipe. Naruto grinned and continued, "You still fight even though you lost. This is the part where you beg for your life," and squeezed tighter on his windpipe. Sasuke's eyes almost popped out of his head and he scratched at Naruto's arm. Is this the end? Sasuke thought briefly before he said, "Stop, Naruto. I beg you, please let me go." Naruto brought his finger to his chin, as if thinking about Sasuke's request. Naruto smiled darkly and said, "No, I don't think so. A pathetic worm like you doesn't deserve to live." Sasuke closed his eyes and thought, "Will it hurt when I die?" Naruto suddenly dropped Sasuke, surprising the young Uchiha. Sasuke rubbed his throat and asked hoarsely, "Why didn't you kill me?" Naruto shrugged and answered, "Because I wanted to teach you a lesson. When you fight and you lose, begging for your life won't help you. To me, it makes you look even more pathetic." Sasuke looked at Naruto before saying, "How do you know this?" Naruto narrowed his eyes and responded, "What are you talking about?" Sasuke said, "You said begging for your life won't help you. How do you know this for a fact?" Naruto looked away before saying coldly, "Because I once begged for my life, and it didn't work." Without another word, he disappeared. Flashback end. Naruto looked on board as Irika continued to tell the students which team they were on. Irika said, "Team 7 will be Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Sasami Hokuto." Naruto turned to see Sakura yelling triumphantly while Sasuke was groaning. Naruto turned to see a girl sitting rolling her eyes. Naruto guessed that that must have been Sasami. She had light brown hair that she covered with a black bandana, hazel eyes, and a light complexion. She had on a sleeveless black v-neck shirt with mesh armor underneath, and a white vest jacket over it. She had on black tight pants and one pant's leg was rolled up showing bandages. Naruto would have thought she was cute if she proved capable. If she was just another pretty face, then Naruto wasn't interested. Naruto looked on as Kiba, the Hyuga, and the trenchcoat kid were paired up. Ino, Choji, and Shikamaru were partnered together, making Sasuke right about the Ino-Shikacho formation. When Irika stopped saying names, many students noticed that Naruto wasn't paired up with a team. Kiba laughed loudly and said, "He must have failed. He doesn't have a team." Sasuke watched Naruto as he started to chuckle darkly, and his chuckle morphed into full-blown laughter as he explained, "You are an idiot. If I failed, I wouldn't be sitting here." Kiba flushed at Naruto's retort and growled inwardly at being made an idiot once again. Irika decided to explain, "Naruto has been put up for an apprenticeship. He will be trained privately." Sakura put her hand up and said, "But that's not fair. Why is it only him? Since Sasuke is the rookie of the year, shouldn't he have an apprenticeship as well?" Sasuke groaned as many of his fangirls nodded and murmured in agreement. Naruto looked at Sakura and replied, "I got one because I'm a dangerous person. If it was up to me, I would kill all of you and I wouldn't even bat an eyelash." Sakura had fear edged on her face as she looked away. Naruto grinned and continued, "The Hokage feared I would kill my teammates, so he decided to have me privately trained." Everyone, besides Sasuke, looked at Naruto in shock, and then an awkward silence filled the room. The silence was interrupted when Danzo appeared in the classroom. Danzo looked to Naruto and said, "The usual place now," and disappeared without another word. Naruto grinned and said loudly, "If you'll excuse me, I got training to do," and quickly walked out of the room. XXX. Naruto was confused when Danzo walked up to him with two kids in tow. The first one had the palest skin that Naruto had ever seen. His shirt was midriff and high-collared, and he wore black pants. He wore a backpack that must have carried his scrolls, Naruto assessed. Naruto also noticed the gray and black vest jacket over it. The jacket was worn by most of Danzo's route. He had a tanto on his back that was the primary weapon of the route. Naruto looked at the other kid and looked him over. The kid had a mask on with the kanji sign for nobody on the top of the mask. The kid had black spiky hair that protruded from the back of the mask. He wore a black shirt and black pants. A gray flak jacket was worn over the shirt, metal arm guards and gloves. He seemed to look bored as he looked around at anywhere but Naruto. Naruto looked at Danzo and asked, "What the hell is this? I thought I was going to be privately trained." Danzo didn't say anything but pointed to the two kids. He answered, "That was a half-truth. You need to learn how to work with people. These will be your teammates. Naruto, this is Sai, and a new recruit, Dorimo." Naruto noticed the name meant no one and was intrigued with the kid's background. Sai, who Naruto now identified as the pale one, walked forward and gave the fakest smile Naruto had ever seen as he said, "It is a pleasure to meet you, Naruto-kun." Naruto cringed at the honorific and replied, "Kun is not needed, trust me." Sai nodded and the smile never left his face. Naruto felt a little creeped out by the kid. Dorimo walked up and said, "Danzo says you're capable. I hope that that is true." Naruto scoffed and looked at Danzo as if asking him if he was serious. Danzo only looked at the three and said, "You will be training for the next month, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses. Then you will fight one of my route and he will assess your teamwork." Naruto asked, "What happens if we fail?" "You won't," and Danzo disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto sighed heavily and looked at his teammates and said, "So Sai, what can you do?" Sai pulled out a scroll from his backpack and opened it. The scroll revealed ink and paintbrushes. Naruto's eyebrows furrowed at the sight and he said, "So you paint?" I asked, as in, what could you do when it comes to your skills? You do know that, right? Sai only smiled and picked up the paintbrush and the ink, and as he dipped the paintbrush in the ink, he said, "Super Beast imitation training," and ink splashed onto the ground. Naruto widened his eyes in shock as the ink transformed into little mice, which scurried on the ground. Sai turned to Naruto and said, "Is this satisfactory?" Naruto thought, "That is weird. I've never seen anything like that." Naruto nodded a yes and turned to Dorimo and asked, "So what can you do? No one?" Dorimo, without a word, turned into smoke. Naruto narrowed his eyes and said, "You could turn into smoke. That's why you are called No One." Dorimo returned to his regular form and nodded. Naruto smiled and said, "I believe this is something that we could definitely use. So how about we start training?" Dorimo and Sai both nodded in agreement. Naruto turned to Sai and asked, "Does Dorimo ever talk?" Sai thought for a second before answering, "No, not really. Besides, when he said he hopes you're strong, not really." Naruto sighed and said, "All right, let's go. Triple X." Naruto was getting excited as he fought Sai and Dorimo. Dorimo dissolved into smoke and rushed towards Naruto. Naruto looked back as a stampede of lions made of ink charged him from behind. Naruto went through hand seals and inhaled, wind style, Kitsune's breath, and a wave of air collided with Dorimo and his body mixed with the air. Dorimo instantly changed into his normal body and grabbed his tanto as the lions neared Naruto. Naruto turned his attention to the lions and blew tiny fireballs that morphed into little foxes. The foxes collided with the lions, and the foxes burned through the lions, and the flames mixed with the ink caused a reaction resulting in an explosion. The explosion reached Naruto and he covered himself with chakra. The smoke covered Naruto, and Naruto went on the defensive. The smoke burned Naruto's eyes as he looked around him. Suddenly an ink snake shot through the ground and bit Naruto's leg. Naruto grimaced as the snake dissolved into ink. Birds shot through the smoke and charged Naruto. Naruto threw kunai, managing to defeat some, while 5 birds managed to get close. Naruto widened his eyes when he saw explosion tags on the birds. Oh shit. And the tags exploded point blank. The explosion was greater than the previous one, and Sai recoiled from the heat. He turned to Dorimo and nodded. Dorimo disappeared without a word. When the smoke cleared, Dorimo was on Naruto with his tanto to his throat. Sai gave his trademark smile and said, "You lost, Naruto." Naruto grinned insanely as red chakra started to envelope his body. Dorimo was hit with a wave of the most malevolent chakra that he had ever felt. Dorimo tried to keep his emotions under control, but found himself backing away from the boy fearfully. Naruto got up slowly and laughed as the chakra flared dangerously around him. He suddenly disappeared and Sai vision almost went white when Naruto punched him in the gut. Dorimo regained his composure and went on the offensive and blew a fireball towards Naruto. Naruto turned and lazily blew a fireball, nearly twice as big as Dorimo's, and watched as the fireball consumed Dorimo's. Dorimo dodged the fireball by turning to smoke and moved to Naruto. Naruto turned to Sai and grabbed him by the throat and threw him. Sai skidded against the ground but quickly recovered his footing. Dorimo changed and thrust his blade forward, intending to stab Naruto. Naruto lazily slapped the blade away and thrust his claws towards Dorimo's chest. Dorimo dodged and his hand suddenly turned to smoke. He thrust his hand in Naruto's belly and changed his hand back to normal. Naruto's grin suddenly dropped as he looked down. Blood was pouring out of his stomach profusely. Naruto dropped down on one knee, clearly surprised. Dorimo took the chance and confident he gathered enough force. He threw a blinding punch to Naruto's temple, knocking the blonde out. Dorimo sighed heavily as Sai asked, "What was that?" Dorimo's shrug was his only answer. Sai thought of the strange power. "I knew Danzo told us of Naruto's strange power, but it seemed like somebody else was completely in control." Sai looked at Naruto, who was snoring loudly. Sai noticed that the wound was healing rapidly. Sai furrowed his eyebrow at the sight and thought, "His healing factor is incredible." Sai, devoid of any emotion, stated, "Leave him for now. It seems his power includes healing at an incredible rate. He should be awake in a few." Dorimo nodded and turned to sit by a tree. Sai did the same as they kept watch over Naruto. An hour had passed before Naruto woke up groggily. He looked at Dorimo and growled, "You stuck your damn hand in my stomach." Dorimo only shrugged, which infuriated Naruto even more. Sai decided to cut in. "You were out of control. If Dorimo didn't incapacitate you, who knows what you would have done." Naruto turned to Sai and put up his middle finger. "For your information, I was control. I was testing you guys." Sai looked at him skeptically. "Then why are you so upset at the fact that Dorimo put his hand through your hand?" Naruto rolled his eyes and responded, "Because he put a damn hand through my stomach." Sai didn't look convinced and got up and said, "So it seems we know each other's strengths and weaknesses." When he said this, he turned to Naruto, which earned him the finger. Sai, unaffected by the insult, continued, "So why don't we get started on our teamwork?" Naruto got up and grinned while saying, "I say let's get this finished already. I haven't killed anybody since I was in the hospital." Sai narrowed his eyes at the comment, thinking, "He's been in a coma since he was 2 if Danzo was correct. He couldn't have killed anyone." Dorimo caught the comment as well, but no one saw him narrow his eyes like Sai did. Sai put the thought away as he said, "Let's get started. Naruto and I will spar against you, Dorimo." Naruto shook his head and countered, "That will take way too long for me. How about this?" And Naruto went through a single hand seal, and with a puff of smoke almost 100 Narutos appeared. Sai widened his eyes in surprise at the sheer number of clones Naruto had just created. Sai looked at Naruto and saw him smirking confidently. Incredible, he doesn't even look tired. Sai thought as Dorimo took in the sight, but he didn't say anything. Sai, Naruto, and Dorimo closed in together as the clones started to advance. The 3 boys nodded to each other and charged the clones. XXX. Danzo watched on impressed as the 3 boys pressed the attack against one of his best route. Yamanaka played defensively as Dorimo circled around as smoke waiting for an opening. As Naruto with 5 clones was the main attacker as the 3 kids established him as the powerhouse. Sai was backing up Naruto with ink lions that would attack when Naruto got tired or pushed back. Fu could only do so much as he tried to keep the openings to a minimal in case Dorimo attacked, and Naruto and his clones pushing him. Danzo, seeing enough, cried, "Cease your attack." The 4 quickly obeyed as Naruto had his clones dispelled. Dorimo returned to his normal form. As the ink lions dissolved into ink, Fu turned to Danzo and bowed. The 3 followed Fu and bowed. Naruto hated bowing to anyone, but he had to suck it up as Danzo spoke. "You 3 have impressed me today with your teamwork. Teamwork is what keeps ninjas alive out in the field." He told the 4 to rise and he continued, "Fu, you're dismissed. As for you 3, you will be named Team Ryu no Tsum." Naruto smiled inwardly while thinking, "Dragon's claw? A fox's claw would have been better." The Kyuubi nodded, agreeing with the boy. Sai and Dorimo nodded. Danzo continued, "Your first mission will be in a week. Train for as much as you can until then. Your ninja journey is beginning here." Danzo turned and left, leaving the 3 to themselves. Naruto turned to the 2 and said, "I guess I could work with you guys. After all, this is all but temporary." Dorimo nodded and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto pouted and said, "Damn it, I forgot to ask Danzo if he could teach me that." Sai gave Naruto his fake smile and said, "I'm sure he could teach you, Naruto-kun," and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto was too heated to retort about Sai using the Kuin honorific with his name again. He walked away thinking, "I need to learn that," as he walked out of Danzo's HQ. Naruto, Sai, and Dorimo stood before Danzo as Danzo briefed them on their mission. Danzo said, "Your objective is to assassinate a bandit leader that has found residence in a town near the border of the Land of Fire." Sai and Dorimo nodded while Naruto looked at Danzo quizzically. "Why hasn't any other shinobi already dealt with this?" Naruto asked. "Simply because I had this mission reserved for you," Danzo answered as if speaking to a child. Naruto growled, not liking the old man's tone, but swallowed his pride as he begrudgingly nodded. Danzo looked at Naruto for a few seconds and said, "Is there a problem, Uzumaki?" Naruto looked at Danzo and gritted his teeth, saying, "None whatsoever." Danzo nodded before continuing. "These particular groups of bandits have called themselves the Leaf's Disciples. Before, they only believed in the limitation of ninja. Now they believe in the extermination of all ninjas. Up until 2 months ago, they were protesters. Now, under a new leader whose identity has not been revealed, the bandits have gotten bolder, and their tactics have grown exponentially violent," Danzo explained. "They have exiled the villagers of this town and claimed the town as their HQ. This is where you come in. These lowly bandits should not be a problem. Exterminate them. Leave no evidence of the fact that they even existed." Ryu no Tsum nodded as they left without a single word. XXX. Naruto, Sai, and Dorimo met at the entrance to the front gate. Sai watched as Naruto walked up and glared questioningly when he saw Sai with a mask on. The mask was blank, except for the twin black eyebrows that were marked above the eyes of the mask. Naruto asked, "Besides Dorimo, who feels he needs one, why do you have a mask, Sai?" Sai said, "The mask is to conceal our identity. Danzo-sama operates from the shadows. The third Hokage has allowed for Danzo to take missions without his consent for a while. The root doesn't exist and therefore neither do we." Sai handed Naruto a mask, who just looked at it weirdly. Naruto handed the mask back while saying, "Sorry, I'm not in your little club. I don't need a mask. When we're on this mission, whoever sees my face dies." Sai looked ready to protest but decided against it as his trademark smile creeped on his face. "If you want it to be that way, Naruto-kun," which caused the blonde to sneer angrily, causing Sai to smile even more. Dorimo cleared his throat and said, "If you are done, let's get this mission started." Naruto pointed at Dorimo accusingly and responded, "I thought you didn't talk." Dorimo said blandly, "For a mission to be successful, Communication is key. Therefore, I will be speaking during this mission. Naruto raised his eyebrow and shrugged nonchalantly as Sai cleared them for departure from the village. Naruto grinned, thinking that he could just kill them during the mission and disappear. It would be so easy to do, and the border was right near the village. It would take a couple of days for Danzo to realize that something was wrong, and take even more days just to go to where the village was. By that time, Naruto would be long gone. The Kyuubi said, "That is not a good idea. This Danzo is no fool. He will surely have you followed in case you lose control again." Naruto's smile faded and cursed inwardly, feeling the Kyuubi was right. Sai had seen Naruto's agitated face and asked, "Is there a problem, Naruto?" This question was answered by a swift shake of his head as Naruto growled lowly. Sai looked at Dorimo, who seemed to not care as he looked at the forest that surrounded the village. Sai then knew that Dorimo wanted to start the mission as he said, "Naruto, let's go. We are leaving now." Naruto nodded and Sai and Dorimo ran towards the forest, with Naruto behind them. XXX. Naruto knew it would take several days for them to actually get to the town. Sai and Dorimo were running like bats out of hell. If Naruto was anyone else, he probably couldn't keep up with them. As they ran towards the border, Naruto thought, "When we get there, I need to train more. Specifically, more of the kenjutsu that I saw." Naruto had been looking at the kenjutsu with interest as he tried to find a way to reverse the Shiki Fujin and release the Kyuubi. The Kyuubi had told Naruto that if he could reverse the Shiki Fujin, the Kyuubi could be of more help to Naruto from the outside. Since then, Naruto had been doing all he could researching the jutsu. He only found a little bit of information pertaining to it, but that didn't stop him from researching all the same. Sai turned from Naruto after seeing Naruto was in deep thought. Sai didn't trust the wild boy, and he knew Dorimo didn't either. Besides the completely erratic behavior Naruto showed, when he sparred with them, it seemed he had no problem killing them. It was like he didn't even care that it was only supposed to be a training spar. He took it to a completely different level. Sai had told Danzo of this, and Danzo told him and Dorimo to watch Naruto carefully. If anything happened, Dorimo and Sai were ordered to remove the problem. Sai and Dorimo knew what their master meant instantly. If Naruto posed a problem, they were to kill him. At first, Sai took this order with silenced confidence. He felt that him and Dorimo would be able to handle Naruto if the need ever rose. Then, as he contemplated the order, he realized that he wasn't as sure as he was before. Naruto was powerful as he was able to hold off him and Dorimo at the same time, even going as far as being able to immobilize Dorimo and send him to the hospital. Sai looked at Dorimo, who didn't seem to focus on any of them, but what was ahead of him. Naruto turned to Sai and asked, "How long till we get to the village?" Sai turned to Naruto with a fake smile plastered on his face as he answered, "It will take 2 more days until we actually get there." Naruto groaned loudly and started to run faster, signaling Sai and Dorimo to pick up the pace. Sai and Dorimo picked up on the signal and started to run faster as well. XXX. The sun was down when Naruto, Sai, and Dorimo decided to make camp for the night. When Sai and Dorimo started to make camp, Naruto quickly assumed the role of taking watch, perching on a nearby tree. Naruto looked out the forest and started to feel a longing. He wanted desperately to just run away, to just kill them and leave. But he had things to do in the village still. No matter how much he wanted to, he couldn't leave yet. Naruto looked back at his teammates and scoffed silently. His red eyes seemed to glisten in comparison to the shadows and darkness that surrounded him. Naruto turned to see Sai standing beside him. Naruto growled, "What do you want, Sai?" Sai sat down on the branch much to Naruto's chagrin and said, "Well, I didn't think that you would want to be alone." Naruto scoffed and retorted, "I think you and I both know that I would rather be alone." Sai didn't respond as he just sat there staring at the blonde. Naruto saw Sai just staring and groaned, "The way you're staring at me, one would wonder if you swung that way, Sai." Sai just smiled and said, "If I was gay, I wouldn't go after you." And without another word, Sai dropped down from the branch, leaving the blonde alone. Naruto sat there speechless for a minute and quickly regained his composure. He growled at the comment and turned back to the forest. He stated inwardly, "I don't know how to respond to this kid. He's so weird." The QB growled and said, "The way to respond is to slit his throat." Naruto shook his head and thought of Sai's lifeless body with blood splattered all over. Naruto couldn't help but smile evilly as he thought about it, and his chakra started to flare in excitement. But as soon as it flared, it quickly disappeared. Sai felt the chakra spike and watched Naruto warily. He turned to Dorimo, who was watching Naruto as well, with a kunai in hand. Dorimo was wary of Naruto ever since the blonde shoved his hand in Dorimo's stomach. Naruto turned to see Sai and Dorimo watching him cautiously, and Naruto smiled insanely when he saw the kunai in Dorimo's hand. "Oh, don't worry. I don't bite often." Naruto paused, seeing their emotionless faces. Naruto shrugged before turning back and leaving Sai and Dorimo to their thoughts. XXX. It had been 2 hours since Naruto had taken watch and nothing happened. Sai and Dorimo were in the tent they had set up, and Sai was talking to Dorimo about Naruto. "He's unstable. If the need ever rises, we need to make sure we put him down quickly. We can't afford him recuperating from our attack." Dorimo nodded in agreement, secretly wishing to be the one to kill the blonde. He wanted revenge for Naruto putting him in the hospital. Meanwhile, outside, Naruto watched intently as he saw nearby smoke, signaling a fire. Naruto turned to the camp and wondered if he should tell the others. Deciding against it, he leapt from the tree branch and ran towards the smoke. XXX. Naruto watched in interest as the 3 men set up camp. They didn't seem to be ninja based on what Naruto observed, but he still kept that possibility in his mind. The first man, who wore a bandana, asked the silver-haired man, "Hitsugaya, how long until we get back to the boss?" The silver-haired man, now identified as Hitsugaya, answered, "We should be there in 2 days' time. The village was a perfect spot, for the boss will be happy to know that that family didn't get away." The third man, who was very large, chuckled heartily. "I'm glad I went with you. The wife and the daughter were exquisite." He grinned lecherously. Naruto narrowed his eyes and thought, "Oh, this is going to be fun," with the QB agreeing, anticipating the bloodshed. The first man nodded in agreement and said, "Too bad they didn't last long. I could have had more fun with the daughter." The 2 men laughed while Hitsugaya shook his head in disgust. He didn't know why the boss stuck him with these pigs, but he had to obey. Naruto grinned in the shadows and let his killing intent leak a little. Hitsugaya instantly felt the intent and narrowed his eyes. "Be careful, we're not alone." The 2 men grabbed their swords and prepared for the worst. Naruto chuckled darkly, drawing their attention, and he said, "You're right, you aren't alone." And his chakra flared violently, hitting the 3 men full force. Hitsugaya choked as he dropped down to one knee. Never before had he experienced anything like this. The other 2 were worst off. The large man started to bawl violently, and the man with the bandana started to mumble incoherently. Naruto made his move as he quickly closed distance between himself and Hitsugaya. Hitsugaya growled out, "Damn ninja," and charged Naruto and swung towards Naruto's head. Naruto dodged lazily and with precision and speed, counterattacked, sending Hitsugaya back. Hitsugaya tried desperately to defend himself, but Naruto delivered an axe kick to his temple, effectively knocking him out. Naruto turned his attention to the 2 men, who seemed to regain their composure, but their hands were still shaking while they gripped their swords. Naruto grinned, seeing their fear, and decided to be dramatic, and he walked over to them slowly. The 2 men backed up while the man with the bandana squeaked, "Stay back. We have no qualms about killing children. Do you know who we are? We are the Leaf's disciples." Naruto didn't seem to hear him as he continued to walk over to them slowly. The large man growled in an attempt to be intimidating, but when that didn't work, he did the only thing he could think of. He charged the boy. With a guttural roar, he ran towards the boy, and with a vertical swing, he hoped to lob the boy's head off. Naruto lazily dodged the sloppy strike, and with his now sharpened nails, he dug into the man's side. The man screamed in pain and swung again. Naruto leaned back, the sword inches away from his throat, and Naruto dug his nails into the man's stomach. Naruto grinned, seeing the man's blood spurt out as the man coughed up blood violently. The man with the bandana snapped out of his stupor and went to assist his comrade. He ran at Naruto's side and thrust forward with his sword. Naruto sidestepped the attack and turned his attention to him. He threw a punch that aimed at the man's jaw. The man dodged, but realized too late that it was a feint as Naruto quickly ran his nails through his stomach, ripping through his chest while gripping his spine. The life in the man's eyes quickly left as he shivered violently. Naruto gripped his spine harder and snapped it in two. The man crumpled to the floor dead before he even touched the ground. Naruto smiled darkly and turned to the man who stared at his dead comrade in horror. Naruto advanced towards him, but the man had other ideas. Tears filled his eyes as he cradled his wound. "Please don't kill me. I want to live." Naruto's grin only grew as he discarded his words and walked towards him. The man backed up until he hit a tree. Seeing no other option, he started to plead. "No, please, don't kill me. My boss is rich. He will give you wealth if you don't kill me. He will give you anything you want." Naruto stopped dead in his tracks and seemed to think about it. The man started to be filled with hope, thinking he was probably going to live. Naruto grinned toothily, showing elongated fangs as he responded darkly. "I want your heart in my hands, and that's something I can take right now." The man widened his eyes in shock and shook his head while muttering, "No." He tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. Naruto charged him and held his head up, revealing his neck. Naruto growled primally and with a roar, plunged his fangs into the man's neck, ripping into his throat. The man moaned, feeling blood run down his neck, and Naruto, with a quick motion, ripped into the big man's chest and felt for his heart. When he located the organ, he pressed and with force ripped the organ out of the man's chest. The bandit let out a final gurgle before he dropped to the ground dead. Naruto wiped the blood from his mouth with an insane smile plastered on his face as he relished the death of the disgusting bandit. Naruto turned his attention to Hitsugaya, who was still knocked out. Naruto looked at the man coldly as he walked up to the unconscious man. He bent down and said quietly, "Ah, he's sleeping. Well, let's change that." He grabbed Hitsugaya's shoulder and gripped it tightly. He pressed harder and harder until he saw Hitsugaya grimace in discomfort. The discomfort turned into blinding pain as Naruto's nails dug into his shoulder blades. Hitsugaya screamed in pain and widened his eyes in fear, seeing Naruto bloodied. Naruto grinned playfully, but it promised nothing of the sort as he said cheerfully, "Well, hello? So glad of you to join us." He grinned, showing bloody teeth, creeping Hitsugaya out even further. Naruto turned and pointed towards his dead comrades. "I hope you bring me more entertainment than they did." Hitsugaya looked at his comrades, and seeing them dead almost made him throw up. It wasn't necessarily the fact that they were dead. It was more of the fact of how they were killed. The bodies were mutilated, especially the man in the bandana whom he had known as Tatsuki. Hitsugaya gagged and Naruto laughed maliciously and said, "Oh, come on. Like you haven't seen dead people before, especially after what those two did to that family." Hitsugaya widened his eyes in shock and looked at Naruto. "So is that it? You believe yourself some type of avenger? You wish to avenge this family?" Hitsugaya asked and was surprised when Naruto scoffed and shook his head. "Of course not, that would be a waste of time. Avenging one's death is just a giant waste of time and energy. Anyway, I didn't even know this family. Shit, for all I know, they could have been complete assholes. I probably would have killed them myself." Naruto smiled demonically as if relishing the thought before he turned his attention back to Hitsugaya. Hitsugaya couldn't believe what he had just heard as he thought, "This kid. What the hell is he?" He tried to back away but winced when he felt a stabbing pain rocket through his head. Naruto chuckled before saying, "Yeah, I hit a bit hard when I attacked, but down to business, where is your boss?" Hitsugaya looked puzzled but quickly regained his composure as he said, "I won't tell you. The boss would kill me if I betrayed him." This was quickly met with Naruto grabbing his throat and squeezing, almost crushing his windpipe in the process. All sick playfulness gone. Naruto said coldly, "What makes you think that I won't kill you now? I'm simply giving you a way to preserve your life. If you don't, you die, and I'm significantly more imaginative when it comes to killing than your boss could ever be." As if to further his point, his other hand dug into the center of Hitsugaya's chest, making him gasp in pain. Hitsugaya struggled against the pressure on his chest and stopped. His breathing started to quicken as he started to panic. He didn't want to die yet, and he knew the boss would kill him, but this kid would probably stall his death and make his torture as long as he possibly could. Hitsugaya, in an act of preservation, made his choice. All right, the village had a temple where the villagers praised their deities. The boss thought it would be amusing for them to honor him instead of their deities. The Kyuubi scoffed inwardly while saying, "Humans' infinite arrogance still astounds me." Naruto didn't really care about the man's arrogance as he looked down on Hitsugaya, contemplating whether or not he should kill the bandit. The Kyuubi objected, "I wouldn't kill him just yet. He could be useful for this particular mission." Naruto nodded inwardly and grabbed Hitsugaya's shoulder. Hitsugaya closed his eyes, preparing for death, until he heard, "You can gain your freedom. You will lead me to your leader. His death is my mission, and with his death he replaces yours." Hitsugaya looked at Naruto, looking slightly hopeful. Naruto saw the hope in his eyes and was really tempted to rip the hope from his eyes, but he needed him, so not yet. Naruto said, "Follow me. My teammates and I will brief you when we get there," and walked into the forest. Hitsugaya got up, shaking his head in an attempt to get rid of his headache. He looked at his former comrades as their blood stained their ground. Letting a small sneer grace his features, he turned and followed Naruto, his new leader. Naruto walked through the forest with Hitsugaya following him silently. The silence was deafening and awkward as Hitsugaya contemplated whether to run for it. This kid seemed to have his guard down. He could probably knock him out and run for it. Hitsugaya was contemplating while Naruto was thinking, "I wonder if he has the balls to run for it." He looked sparingly at the silver-haired man, who stiffened when the boy glanced at him. Naruto chuckled maliciously as he turned back and proceeded to the camp. He wondered what Sai and Dorimo were going to say about this development. XXX. Naruto got his answer when they welcomed the bandit with caution. They couldn't turn the man away. He was their way to the bandit leader himself. They were currently questioning Hitsugaya to receive any information that could help them. Sai asked him, "Why are you called the Leaf's disciples? It just seems you are all just bandits. You aren't even shinobi." Hitsugaya seemed to be angered by the question and responded, "We are the Leaf's disciples because the Leaf has betrayed us. The leader and I were shinobi in the hidden Leaf village. While he was a jounin, I was a part of ANBU, one of the best in the assassination division. I was on a secret mission to assassinate the daimyo of Grass. I was betrayed by my teammates. They claimed they were ordered to kill me." Hitsugaya clenched his fists in anger, remembering that day clearly. His bloodied form as they left him to die. Naruto furrowed his brow as he listened to the man's story. Very interesting, indeed. An ANBU betrayed by his village. "Do you believe his story?" Naruto asked the Kyuubi inwardly, who answered, "It's highly unlikely that they would just throw away one of their best assassin. Unless there is something he isn't telling us. I didn't sense any chakra at all when you fought him. He could be lying." Naruto nodded inwardly and decided to interrupt. Naruto asked, "If you're previously ANBU, how is it that you didn't sense me until I attacked?" Hitsugaya wordlessly lifted up his shirt, revealing a seal on his chest. Sai nodded, understanding almost immediately, but Naruto didn't understand. "Why does that have to do with anything?" Naruto asked impatiently. Hitsugaya was tempted to roll his eyes as he explained, "This cuts off my chakra, so I could no longer use it. When you arrived, I could hardly do anything. I only sense your chakra because you allowed me to." Naruto nodded his head in understanding, wondering if he could be removed. Dorimo asked the question in a drawl, "Can it be removed?" Hitsugaya looked confused because he thought that the seal was permanent. Sai thought about it before answering, "From what I can tell, it can be removed. Not by the person who it's restraining, and not by physical means." Naruto looked at it and said, "You would probably need to overload it with chakra. The person who it's restraining wouldn't be able to do it, considering their chakra couldn't be used. Sai looked at Hitsugaya and pondered the possibility. Would you be able to overload it? Your reserves would probably be least affected by it. Sai asked Naruto, who nodded, answering the question. Dorimo nodded and unsheathed his weapon and held it by Hitsugaya's throat. If the bandit tried to do anything, his throat would quickly be slashed. Naruto went over and touched the seal. He concentrated his chakra towards his arm and watched in silent fascination as his chakra connected with the seal. The chakra slipped into the seal, and the seal let off a blue light as the chakra started to overload the seal. Hitsugaya watched in amazement as the seal dropped harmlessly to the floor. He felt an odd yet familiar sensation as his chakra once again called to be used. Hitsugaya got up, feeling the blade edge closer to his throat. He went through hand seals that he thought he would never do again, earth-style, seismic fists, and almost cried out in joy when rocks gathered around his hands, forming giant fists made of stone. He released the jutsu and looked at Naruto with a new look, a look of gratitude. Naruto nodded in his direction and thought, he's mine to control now. He will follow me anywhere. Gratitude is an amazing thing. The Kyuubi agreed in his mind, amused of the events that were taking place. Naruto said, Great, now show us where your leader is. I'm sure you no longer have an allegiance with him. Hitsugaya hesitated, wondering if he could betray his leader, his friend. Could he even call him a friend? They only linked up because of similar circumstances. Hitsugaya looked into Naruto's eyes and saw that he would have no problem killing him if he said the wrong thing. Hitsugaya felt his chakra run through his veins and thought, this is only possible because of him. This boy gave me my chakra back, my life back. With that said, he made his decision as he said, I no longer have any allegiance with the Leaf's disciples. I'm yours to command. Sai and Dorimo looked at each other cautiously. They knew that Hitsugaya would be grateful towards the blonde, but to pledge himself to him, Naruto had just gained a follower. Naruto only grinned darkly as he said, Excellent, now show us. Hitsugaya nodded and looked to Sai and Dorimo. Sai sighed and said, We leave in 5 minutes. Clear this area. Leave no evidence we were here. Hitsugaya will lead us towards the village. Naruto, you will stay behind Hitsugaya, and Dorimo and I will stay in the trees. We will notify you if there are any changes. Dorimo and Naruto nodded as they worked to get rid of the tent and the evidence that they were there. Sai turned to Hitsugaya and said, We cannot say what will happen to you after this mission, but if you help us, we will put in a good word for you with our master. Hitsugaya nodded and looked conflicted to possibly going back to the Leaf Village. Naruto and Dorimo quickly got rid of the tent with a quick fire jutsu and discarded everything they wouldn't need. Dorimo turned to Sai and nodded. They were ready to go. Sai and Dorimo then took to the trees, as Naruto nodded to Hitsugaya as they both began to walk with Hitsugaya as the lead. XXX. It had been almost 2 hours since Hitsugaya started to lead them towards the village. They were looking at the village, Sai and Dorimo with cold indifference, Naruto with a dark interest plastered on his face, and Hitsugaya looked on with anxiety. The village had been quiet, the villagers too terrified to even leave their homes. Bandits had been patrolling the village to make sure nobody came in and found out what was going on. Naruto said absent-mindedly, I can just slaughter them. I need me some action. Hitsugaya looked at Naruto with surprise as he thought, he just killed somebody 4 hours ago. Sai shook his head long since removing his mask said, Negative, although our mission is to destroy them, we shouldn't just charge in. We need to see what exactly we're dealing with. Naruto groaned loudly as Dorimo suddenly shifted to smoke and drifted away. Sai turned to Naruto and said, I'll unleash a lion when I call you. Watch him. Make sure he doesn't try anything. With that said, he disappeared in a swirl of leaves, leaving Naruto alone with Hitsugaya. Naruto sighed heavily and said, Well, I'm not sitting here. That's boring. He turned to Hitsugaya and gave a dark grin. Take me to the bandit leader. Hitsugaya nodded grimly and ran towards the village with Naruto following him. XXX. Dorimo and Sai met at the same spot, near a villager's house. They made sure a patrol wasn't near them as they knocked on the door, hoping someone was home. A voice, a girl, said fearfully, Yes, who is it?" Sai cleared his throat and said, "We've been sent by the Leaf Village. We're here to help you." The girl didn't seem to trust just words as she said, "Prove it. Show me the leaf headband." Sai removed his headband from his forehead and knocked. "My headband is in my hand. Open the door slightly so you may see for yourself." The girl seemed to hesitate before she opened the door ever so slightly and peered outside. She seemed to sigh in relief as she opened the door and whispered, "Please come in." Sai and Dorimo walked in as she closed the door. She continued, "I'm sorry, I just had to make sure. You could never be too careful, especially with the situation now." Dorimo decided to speak. "The Leaf's disciples are dangerous bandits, led by a former Leaf ninja. Can you tell us where the leader might be holed up?" The girl nodded and said, "In the hill overlooking the village is a shrine, where we pay respects to our dead. He believed it would be funny if he took over and had us worship him there. Whoever doesn't go dies. We've been forced to bow down and worship him." At the word worship, she clenched her fists in anger. Sai replied, "Do you know if he is there now?" The girl nodded and peered out the window. Sai looked out the window and saw the patrols running swiftly towards the outskirts of the village. Sai suddenly felt a wave of dread sweep over him, and he couldn't help but shiver slightly. Sai turned to Dorimo, and seeing his tense shoulders meant that Dorimo felt it too. The girl shivered violently and asked fearfully, "What is this feeling?" Sai cursed inwardly and thought, "Damn it, you couldn't wait, Naruto?" Sai hissed, "Stay here, don't leave this house." And with Dorimo left the house and ran swiftly to where Naruto was leaking his killing intent. XXX. Naruto laughed insanely as he killed man after man. Bandits tried to flee, the more brave ones tried to fight, but they all fell, they all died. Hitsugaya was trying to keep up with him, as he went through the bandits that attacked him yelling, "Traitor!" Naruto marched through the lower level of the shrine and called out gleefully, "Come out and face your death, Leaf's disciples," as he ripped out a bandit's throat. 2 bandits tried to run, but 2 claws to the chest quickly stopped their retreat. Naruto leaked out more chakra as his bloodlust started to overwhelm him. Hitsugaya couldn't go on. The kid's chakra was suffocating, yet intoxicating. The chakra seemed to have its own gravity field as he was pushed down. Good thing the bandits were incapacitated as well, or he would have been dead. Naruto screamed out, more, I need more," as he plunged through the bandits, leaving mutilated bodies, torn out throats, and caved-in chests. As the blonde tore through the bandits, the cries started to lessen as his bloodlust increased. The chakra whipped around him violently, and changes started to form. His hair changed from a blonde to a bloody red color, as his whisker marks were now more defined and darkened. He burst through the door to see a man standing by a chair that was placed at the far end of the room, representing a sort of throne. Even though he tried to look confident, his body language showed his fear. He stammered, "What the hell are you doing here? I am Tatsuki Kurosaki. I'm the leader of the Leaf's disciples, and if you do not leave, you will face your death." Hair shadowed Naruto's face as he started to laugh insanely. Tatsuki never heard such a cruel laugh as he backed up. Naruto said darkly, "Face my death? That's interesting. I've faced death, and so it wouldn't be the first time. But I always come back." And with that, he charged with inhuman speeds and he slammed forcibly into Tatsuki's chest. Tatsuki coughed up blood as he skidded into the wall. Naruto pounced on Tatsuki and drove his claw into his eye. Tatsuki screamed in pure agony as Naruto drove his nails into Tatsuki's eye socket. Naruto smiled darkly hearing him scream and yelled, "Scream for me," and lodged another nail into his other eye. A blood-curdling scream flew from Tatsuki's lips as he thrashed from under Naruto. Naruto withdrew his nail from Tatsuki's mutilated eye sockets and rammed a claw through his chest, piercing his lung. Tatsuki let out a mangled, "Please," as he continued to thrash, Naruto grinned darkly as blood splattered on his face. Naruto opened his mouth and red and blue chakra started to form in his mouth. A small ball formed and Naruto closed his mouth around it. He smiled before jumping high in the air using his chakra. He thought, tiny demonic bomb, and with a breath shot the ball towards Tatsuki's dying form, and watched as the bomb exploded on contact with Tatsuki, erasing every trace of Tatsuki, killing him instantly. Dust and smoke rose from the explosion, creating an impressive smokescreen. Naruto dropped to the ground, parting the smoke and nodded at his handiwork. Dorimo moved forward with his smoke form and formed behind Naruto. "You were told to wait," Dorimo drawled as he looked around at the partially destroyed room. Naruto shrugged nonchalantly and responded, "Yeah, well, I never really was the patient type," and turned to see Dorimo holding a sword that was pointed towards his neck. Naruto only seemed to be amused as he muttered, "So is that how it's going to be?" Dorimo stated, "You disobeyed direct orders and decided to decimate this shrine, which was completely unnecessary. You were out of control as you were before. You say you are in control, but I'm not seeing it." Naruto made to grab the sword, but Dorimo pushed it farther into Naruto's neck, drawing blood. Feeling blood flow down his neck, Naruto growled and his chakra started to spike as Sai appeared behind him and said, "Don't do it, Naruto. We don't need to fight. You need to get control of yourself." Naruto growled, feeling his anger spike, but surprisingly he didn't attack. His chakra died down. As his hair returned to its blonde color, his nails retracted, and his fangs retracted. His whisker marks became lighter. He cautiously moved Dorimo's blade away from his neck and said, "I'm good. I'm in control." He walked away without another word, leaving Sai and Dorimo alone. Sai sighed heavily as Dorimo sheathed his weapon. Sai thought, "I thought he would resist and we would have to fight. Good thing he gained control." Dorimo said, "Sai, he's out of control. We will need to report to Danzo. He's quickly becoming a hazard to our mission and our safety." Sai rubbed the back of his head in frustration and nodded in agreement. Danzo would need to know of Naruto's growing instability. If Naruto continued on the path he was going, Sai and Dorimo probably wouldn't live through it. XXX. Danzo rubbed his head in frustration after seeing the report that Sai and Dorimo filed. Naruto was getting unstable, and he was becoming a problem. Danzo sighed and looked to his route that was on standby. "Retrieve Naruto, I need to deal with this here and now." The root nodded and disappeared. Danzo closed his eye and thought, "You've left me no choice, Naruto." 5 minutes later, the root appeared with Naruto by his side. Danzo looked at Naruto with a stern look, while he said, "Leave us." The root promptly disappeared, leaving Danzo and Naruto alone. Naruto's eyes narrowed and his nails elongated slightly, but Danzo saw. Danzo sighed heavily and said, "I've allowed your disrespect and obedience or lack thereof to go on for too long. You will obey what your team and I says. Is that clear, Naruto?" Naruto scoffed and said, "I bow or obey no one. I'm only in this for myself. I don't care what Sai or Dorimo have to say. I don't care what you say for that matter." Danzo remained silent for a minute before nodding curtly. "I hoped it would not come to this. I allowed you to act as you were simply because your emotions were what triggered the QB. But now I see that you have taken advantage of my kindness, and I've learned from my mistake." Without another word, Danzo unraveled his Sharingan, and before Naruto could attack him, Naruto suddenly froze in place. His eyes morphed into the Sharingan, showing that Danzo had control. Danzo said, "You've been placed under my control now. I'm sorry that it had to come to this, but you've forced my hand." Danzo froze as Naruto seemed to grunt in effort as he tried to move his hands. Danzo put more chakra into his eye, and Naruto stopped his efforts. Danzo breathed heavily and thought, "He can fight it. My Sharingan's hypnosis ability needs work. I must further my ocular abilities." Danzo regained composure and wrapped his eye under bandages and said, "You will stay with me for a small duration of time, until I'm sure my Sharingan can hold you, You will stay in my sight. Naruto nodded slowly and seemed to want to say something but hesitated. Danzo stated, Speak, Naruto. Naruto drawled, May I leave, Danzo? Danzo noticed the left-out honorific and nodded yes, and Naruto left without another word. Danzo sat down and rubbed his forehead in frustration. When the door opened, Sai and Dorimo walked in and bowed before Danzo. Sai was the first to ask, Lord Danzo, what will become of Naruto? Danzo didn't answer at first, wondering just how to phrase the hypnosis. Naruto will be no trouble. Him and I came to an agreement. Danzo worded as Sai and Dorimo seemed to relax their tense shoulders. Dorimo surprisingly asked, And what will come of Hitsugaya? Danzo's eye narrowed when he thought of the ex-Anbu that pledged himself to Naruto. Finally he answered, Watch him for now. Allow him and Naruto to be together. If Hitsugaya starts to present a problem, eliminate him. Sai and Dorimo gave him a firm nod, and Danzo waved his hand signaling that he wanted to be alone. Sai and Dorimo quickly left his office. Naruto, Sai, and Dorimo were at the Leafs training grounds, as Sai and Dorimo targeted. Naruto eyed his teammates with cold indifference as his hands flexed, blood dripping from the tip of his nails. Sai and Dorimo were watching him cautiously, blood trickling down their necks, showing claw marks on their faces. Danzo looked over their sparring match and was happy with the results. His hypnosis has improved to the point where he didn't have to be around Naruto. It had been 2 months since he had put Naruto under his control. The Chunin exams was scheduled for the next week. Naruto, Sai, and Dorimo needed to succeed. Dorimo sucked in a breath and unleashed a fireball that shot towards Naruto. Naruto went through hand seals quickly, and with a breath unleashed flames that transformed into a blazing fox. The fox ran at the fireball and quickly consumed it, creating smoke covering the area. Naruto narrowed his eyes, knowing Dorimo's plan, and went through hand seals once again, but a lion created out of ink charged him, stopping his seals. Naruto cursed inwardly and backed away from the lion, quickly going on the defensive. He twisted his body out of the way of the charging lion, and leapt into the air, and blew a fireball destroying the lion. Naruto felt a blade poke his back, but he was faster. Naruto using chakra quickly jumped over Sai, and when he landed, he tackled Sai into the ground, forcing the breath out of the artist. Dorimo made his appearance behind Naruto, as Sai quickly regained his footing and charged Naruto. Dorimo went through hand seals and muttered, Fire style. Majestic dragon. Dorimo breathed a wave of flames that towered over Naruto. Naruto growled inwardly as he quickly called upon the Kyuubi's chakra. Red chakra licked at his feet as he went through hand seals and breathed a wave of flames as well, flames that rivaled Dorimo's. The flames collided, causing an intense heat. Sai and Dorimo backed away as the flames roared against each other. The flames quickly receded and died down. Almost immediately, Naruto shifted out of their vision and appeared behind them. Using chakra, Naruto ran at Sai, and with enhanced speed he threw a punch towards Sai's face. The punch connected and Sai grunted in pain as white filled his vision. Dorimo swung his sword down on Naruto's head, but the blonde caught it quickly, and grabbing onto the handle, he twisted Dorimo's arm and kicked his stomach with chakra covering his leg. Dorimo wheezed as he doubled over, and Naruto swung a punch aiming for Dorimo's temple. Dorimo, ignoring the pain, grabbed his hand, and with his sword arm, stabbed at Naruto's stomach. Naruto twisted his body, the blade grazing the side of his body, drawing blood. Dorimo took the momentary opportunity and punched Naruto in the stomach. Naruto gritted his teeth in pain as Dorimo went on the offensive. Sai charged behind Naruto and attacked. It took most of what Naruto had to just dodge. Sai grabbed Naruto's shoulders and kicked the back of his shin, forcing Naruto to bend down. Dorimo saw the opportunity and landed a punch, hitting Naruto in the face. Naruto growled in pain and he felt rage start to rise. Naruto pushed out the Kyuubi's chakra, and he could have sworn he heard a malevolent chuckle. His eyes shifted to a crimson color as he pushed Sai and Dorimo back. Sai and Dorimo quickly backed up and charged him simultaneously. Naruto went down on all fours, and almost in the blink of an eye, chakra started to form in his mouth. Dorimo recognized the attack and growled, "Move!" Sai and Dorimo leapt out of the way as Naruto fired the chakra blast out of his mouth. Danzo narrowed his eyes as the blast decimated everything in its path. The blast quickly died down, but the Kyuubi's chakra kept on building. Danzo pushed more chakra into his Sharingan underneath the bandages and thought, "The Kyuubi's chakra is climbing, end the connection." Almost instantly the Kyuubi's chakra dissipated as Naruto charged his teammates again. Danzo said loudly, "That's enough for today." Naruto abruptly stopped his charge. He went to Sai and Dorimo, who were eyeing him cautiously. Danzo thought, they still are wary of him, and said, "Naruto, you will accompany me." Sai and Dorimo continue sparring. Naruto walked towards Danzo and waved nonchalantly at his teammates, signaling he would meet up with them later. They nodded in his direction as they turned to each other and resumed their sparring. XXX. Danzo and Naruto were standing right in front of the Hokage's office. Danzo knocked, and a voice a second later called, "Come in." Naruto walked in first, and the first thing he did was bow. Danzo smiled inwardly at the shocked expression on the Hokage's face. The Hokage quickly regained his composure and said, "You may rise, Naruto." Naruto rose and asked, "Do you have a mission for me, Lord Hokage?" Sarutobi glared at Danzo for a brief second and turned back to Naruto. "No, I don't. I just wanted to see how you were progressing." Naruto looked confused because he thought he was receiving a mission. He thought about it before saying, "I'm progressing. Danzo's training has been of great help. I hope that Danzo has been treating you well." "Immensely, Lord Hokage. He has taken me in and trained me well." Sarutobi stared at Naruto with a pained look before saying, "Please wait outside while I talk to Danzo." Naruto bowed before walking out the door. Sarutobi hissed, "What have you done to him?" Danzo replied, "What I had to do." Naruto was too unstable. He was quickly becoming a problem, and if I didn't handle it the way I did, I don't know what would have happened. Sarutobi's anger was climbing rapidly as he spat. "You've taken what little control he had. You've placed him under a genjutsu." Danzo said evenly, "I did what I had to do besides killing him. The Leaf Village still need their Jinchuriki, and he was out of control. It was out of my hands." Sarutobi clenched his fists in anger as he said between gritted teeth, "We could have done something different. It shouldn't have ended up like this." Danzo responded, "Tell me what we could have done then, Sarutobi. This was for the greater good." Sarutobi growled, inwardly cursing himself for not finding an answer as he said darkly, "You're dismissed, Shimura." Danzo nodded, noting the use of his last name as he turned and left the room. Tears threatened to leave Sarutobi's eyes as he thought, "It shouldn't have ended up like this." XXX. Naruto sat alone in his room as he meditated. His shirt was off, revealing his toned chest, and he wore loose black pants. He found meditation comforting as he tried to silence the same voice in his head. He knew it was the Kyuubi, because Danzo explained to him about his status as the Demon Fox's Jinchuriki. But what he found disturbing was the taunt the Kyuubi constantly mocked him with. The same word over and over, pathetic. He kept repeating the same word over and over until it echoed in Naruto's head. He didn't know why the Kyuubi called him pathetic. Maybe it was resentful of its ceiling. Naruto opened his cerulean eyes and decided that he needed some fresh air. He would talk to Danzo about the fox later. Grabbing his uniform that Danzo had provided him with, he left his room and ventured out to the Leaf Village. XXX. Naruto watched from a rooftop as numerous civilians went through their day as they walked down the streets. Naruto watched people trading, people laughing, and people talking. Naruto paused at a specific group of males and watched a specific man. His face was familiar, but Naruto couldn't place it. As he looked closely at the man, he suddenly heard voices, "Please, save me. I have 2 daughters and a wife." Help me." He then heard a malicious chuckle. Naruto could have sworn he had heard it before, when the voice said, "I begged you for mercy, and I received none. So why should I show you any?" Naruto clutched his head when he heard screams of pain and fear. He heard screams and insane laughing, and he could have sworn he heard flesh being ripped. Naruto growled inwardly and thought, "Why is this happening? What is wrong with me?" He moaned inwardly, hearing blood splatter. What is the meaning of these voices? He thought frantically as he heard a malevolent chuckle ring through his head. Meanwhile, Sasuke was walking towards the training grounds when he chanced upon seeing Naruto on the rooftop. Sasuke remembered the crazed boy and had half a mind to just leave without saying anything. But the way Naruto was clutching his head showed Sasuke he was in pain. So against his better judgment, Sasuke jumped on the building where Naruto was clutching his head. Sasuke went to go and tap on Naruto's shoulder, but decided against instead saying, "Naruto, are you okay?" Naruto froze hearing the voice and heard more voices. "And how are you planning to do that?" He then heard a voice respond, one he swore was his own. "By killing you, of course." He growled darkly, making Sasuke back up a bit, and he drawled, "Uchiha." He turned slowly and faced Sasuke, and the first thing Sasuke noticed was his now cerulean eyes. Naruto continued with a voice that one would describe as tired, "What do you want?" Sasuke noticed that his eyes no longer held the insane glint he once had. He remembered the man with the bandaged eye say, "Because he is needed," and he thought, "He broke you, didn't he?" Sasuke said, "I was wondering if you wanted to spar. It has been a while since we last fought." Naruto cringed when his head was filled with visions of him killing people brutally, and the last fight he had between him and Sasuke. "Not today, Sasuke.
I'm tired.
Maybe later." Without another word, Naruto disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Sasuke looked perplexed as he left. He didn't know what to do now. He groaned loudly when he remembered that he had a training session with his team. Sakura was the most annoying, and she hardly trained. Kakashi was always late to their training sessions, and Sasami was the only one who was mildly tolerable. XXX. Naruto bowed down to Danzo as Danzo said, "What troubles you, Naruto?" Naruto cringed hearing more voices that he thought including Danzo's. "I'm sorry that it had to come to this, but you forced my hand." Naruto hesitated before responding, "Lord Danzo, I'm having these visions of death and destruction. I hear people's voices of them begging me for mercy, but I see them in the streets. I hear the Kyuubi talking to me. He claims I'm weak. What does it mean?" Danzo furrowed his brow in thought. So that was how the Kyuubi manipulated him. Mind games. Danzo remained silent for a minute, which made Naruto even more nervous. Finally Danzo said, "When you were only an infant, the Kyuubi, the demon you house, sent you into a coma. In this coma, you were exposed to visions of civilians beating you mercilessly. In the visions, the only one who helped you was the Kyuubi." Danzo watched Naruto's reaction carefully, knowing his words needed to be worded carefully. He continued, "When you awoke, he changed you to a bloodthirsty monster. You were out of control and you killed when you wanted." Naruto narrowed his eyes in anger as he thought, "That damnable creature. He has manipulated me. He has made me into a monster." Naruto tried to keep his breathing under control when he found that his heartbeat fastened. "What happened? How did you stop me?" Naruto asked. Danzo didn't say anything at first, and Naruto noted his hesitation. Danzo said, "I created a seal that cut off your connection to the Kyuubi. Without his chakra and influence running through your body, you shifted to a stable state of mind." Naruto didn't say anything at first before saying his thanks. Danzo nodded and said, "You're dismissed." Naruto bowed one last time before quickly walking out of the room. Danzo narrowed his eye and said to himself, "Naruto is now closer to the Leaf Village. His relationship with the demon is cut off. He will do well." XXX. Naruto meditated silently as Hitsugaya watched him. Hitsugaya was confused, but he didn't show it. The boy seemed to be saner and less bloodthirsty. Hitsugaya asked carefully, "Are you all right, Naruto?" Naruto raised an eyebrow in response and said, "Why would I not be okay, Hitsugaya?" "Well, you aren't as crazed as you were when I first met you. What happened that would bring about such a change?" Naruto's face seemed to darken at the mention of his change and his fingers flexed dangerously. "That damnable creature tried to morph me into a monster. He shifted my behavior for his own needs. I will never let that happen again." Hitsugaya was about to ask about the creature before Naruto continued. "I will never be manipulated ever again. Not by anybody." Hitsugaya then muttered, "If you want freedom, then leave the Leaf Village. They've had their fair share of manipulating their shinobi." Naruto looked thoughtful for a second before quickly shaking the idea out of his head. "Don't talk of treason ever again, Hitsugaya. You will find my claws at your throat." Naruto then looked at his nails and growled before saying, "The claws that he made me use." Hitsugaya didn't say anything, quickly deciding to keep quiet. Naruto sighed heavily and got up abruptly saying, "I'm not feeling well. Do what you will. I need time to think." Hitsugaya nodded firmly and Naruto quickly left. Hitsugaya thought, I haven't been to Ichiraku's in a while. Maybe I should pay them a visit." Hitsugaya disappeared in a swirl of leaves heading for the ramen stand. XXX. Kotetsu and Izumo sat lazily at the desk by the Leaf Village entrance. They were bored out of their minds as Chunin exam delegates signed in. Kotetsu sighed heavily as he ushered a Miss team into the village. "Ugh, this is so boring, Kotetsu. Why did we pick this job again?" Izumo whined as Kotetsu sighed once again. Kotetsu would have answered, but a new team arrived. Kotetsu could tell that they were Sand Ninja judging by their appearance. The most noticeable one was the short red-haired one. The boy didn't have any eyebrows, which Kotetsu thought was weird. He wore a black full bodysuit with t-shirt-like sleeves, 3/4 length legs, and an open neck. With this, he wore a white cloth over his right shoulder and the left side of his hips, and a wide leather band system over the left shoulder and right side of his hips. Kotetsu noticed a large gourd that was strapped on his back. The other boy who Kotetsu thought wore makeup wore a black, baggy, full bodysuit with a red and yellow circle on the front. He also wears a black hood, which covered his head completely, and had cat-like ears and his Hitai 8 on his forehead. The girl who was next to him, her outfit consists of a single light purple-colored, off-the-shoulders garment that extended to halfway down her thighs, with a scarlet sash tied around her waist. In addition to incorporating fishnet worn over her shoulders and legs, specifically on her right calf and her left thigh, she also wore her black forehead protector around her neck. Kotetsu noticed they kept their distance from the red-haired one. Their sensei, who Kotetsu recognized as Baki of the Sand, said in a gruff voice, "We're here for the Chunin exams." Kotetsu nodded stiffly as he wrote them down. Gaara stared at him blankly, which sent a chill down his spine as they walked away. Izumo stared dumbly at the team and he whispered, "The Sand was always a weird bunch." Kotetsu nodded his head in agreement and laid back on his chair. "That red-haired one was a weirdo. He had a sort of aura about him, I just can't place it." XXX. Gaara watched as civilians walked down the streets laughing and seeming not to care about anything. He long ditched his team, not wanting to be around them lest he killed them. His body tingled at the thought of their lifeless bodies before his eyes. He felt his chakra start to rise. He breathed heavily and thought, "Not yet, soon you will have blood, mother." "What is your business here, Sannin?" a voice said behind him. Gaara quickly turned and seen a masked ninja staring at him intently. Gaara thought, "He has the build of a child." Gaara felt the mysterious shinobi's chakra and felt excited. The masked ninja said more forcibly, "I asked you a question." Gaara said dryly, "The Chunin exams is in a week. My team is here to compete." The masked ninja nodded in understanding and removed his mask. Gaara looked interestingly at the boy's blonde hair and blue eyes and thought, "Those eyes look lifeless. He is dead on the inside. He is like me." Naruto said, Well, it seems I will be competing against you, Sannin. My name is Gaara. May I ask what is yours? Gaara said. Naruto nodded and responded, My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Gaara repeated, Naruto Uzumaki. He nodded and continued, I look forward to seeing you in the Chunin exams. I look forward to killing you. And without another word, Gaara disappeared in a swirl of sand. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the response and thought, He is dangerous. I wonder if he will be a strong opponent. Naruto then disappeared in a swirl of leaves. XXX. Naruto, Sai, and Dorimo sat at the training grounds waiting for word from Danzo. He had already informed them about the Chunin exams, and they all agreed to take the exams. Naruto watched as Sai and Dorimo didn't really pay attention to him, and he knew why. The way I acted when I was under the influence of the Kyuubi. They don't trust me, and rightfully so. Naruto sighed heavily, feeling the stress that had been threatening to eat away at him. Naruto abruptly got up, and Sai and Dorimo looked at him confused, although they didn't show it. My actions have made me untrustworthy, and I acknowledge that. The demon has made me into someone that I am not. I hope that you will look past my previous behavior and work with me, Naruto said with nervousness edged in his voice. Sai and Dorimo looked at each other warily, and after a moment they both nodded towards Naruto. Naruto sighed in relief and briefly smiled at them. At that moment, a root member appeared before them and handed out 3 letters. Then, without another word, he disappeared. Naruto looked at the letter and smirked, seeing what it was. Their Chunin exams participation letter. Naruto looked to Sai and Dorimo, who looked at him. Their eye contact said it all. They were ready for these exams. They signed the paper and decided to train one last time. Ryunotsum was ready to become Chunin. Naruto, Sai, and Dorimo walked into the building that was being used to hold the first part of the Chunin exams. It had been a week since they had signed their letters, and Naruto's attitude had changed immensely. He had changed from the angst-filled boy to a confident and positive child. He was unofficially the personality of the group. Sai and Dorimo didn't show it, but they liked this side of Naruto. It was a good change from the psychotic side of him. As soon as they walked inside the building, they were faced with a crowd of genin who were arguing with what looked like guards. Let us pass, we have to take the Chunin exams. One genin yelled indignantly, but the guard only smirked in response, which only served to infuriate the genin even further. Sai narrowed his eyes and whispered, Dorimo, I hope you see it as well. Dorimo nodded and started to walk away. Naruto looked confused, not seeing the genjutsu that was placed on the door. Sai, seeing Naruto's confusion, whispered, They've placed a genjutsu on the door to make it seem like the entrance to the exam is there. They're doing it to weed out the weaker teams. Naruto nodded in understanding and followed the two. As they walked to the real entrance to the exams, Naruto saw several Konoha teams look towards him, and they tensed. They remembered their last encounter with the blonde, and they wished it would be their last one. Naruto turned to Kiba and heard more voices. Keep away from me, Kiba, or next time either you or your mutt won't survive the encounter. Naruto sighed heavily and walked over to Kiba. Kiba tensed up, and Akamaru growled in his direction, ready to attack Naruto if he tried anything. Everybody saw the confrontation, and 4 ninjas were waiting for a fight, while the Leaf Genin were hoping Naruto wouldn't do anything. Naruto stopped in front of Kiba and said, I apologize for my behavior towards you and your dog when teams were being established. I hope that you forgive me. Kiba looked Naruto over, cautious to the fact that Naruto was lying. Kiba then stuck his hand out and offered a small smile. Naruto grabbed his hand eagerly and smiled back. They shook hands, and Naruto quickly went back to his team. Sai nodded in Naruto's direction, showing his approval, while Dorimo didn't even seem to notice. Dorimo was staring at a silver-haired man with glasses on his face. He sat alone, but he seemed unfazed by the many shinobi that was in the room. Kiba yelled out, This test is going to be a piece of cake. We're going to be Chunin in no time. His team didn't seem to mind his outburst, but the other teams did. The one with the glasses especially. He walked towards Kiba and stopped and pushed his glasses up. I wouldn't count on that. The Chunin exams have always been hard. I've taken these exams over 17 times, the guy said, which earned a laugh from Kiba, which was silenced by a nudge from his teammates. He didn't seem to mind as he kept on going. Although I wouldn't necessarily worry about it. This year's competition doesn't seem challenging. Especially those new Odonines over there. Their village is new, so they shouldn't be that strong. By the way, I'm Kabuto Yakushi. Naruto narrowed his eyes in alarm, when the guy's glasses suddenly shattered and he fell back with a loud groan. 3 kids walked towards him, and Naruto guessed they were the Odonines, and one with his body wrapped up in bandages growled, "I wouldn't underestimate us Odonines. We're winning these exams." Naruto scoffed at the attempt of intimidation and leaked out a bit of the Kyuubi's chakra. Everybody in the room tensed when they felt the malevolent chakra cloud the room. The Odonines were staring at Naruto with amazement, as Naruto said darkly, "No, we're winning this exam. We've trained harder than anyone. We'll win no matter what." Sai smirked inwardly, and Dorimo nodded in agreement. The Odonines quickly regained their composure and growled in their direction, and the Odonine with the scarf was about to retort, until a scarred man appeared in the room. With a deafening "quiet," the man quickly took control of the room. "My name is Ibiki Marino, and I will be proctoring this part of the Chunin exams. You will answer 9 questions, and the last question I will ask you. If we catch you cheating, you and your team will be disqualified, and you will be unable to retake the Chunin exams ever again," Ibiki said, and almost instantly yells of protests were heard. One kid said, "That's unfair. There are some of us that have taken this test already. Why wouldn't we be able to take it again?" Ibiki growled and retorted, "You've never had me as a proctor." The kid looked at Ibiki with disbelief as he sat back on his chair defeated. Naruto looked at Sai and Dorimo with disbelief and whispered, "Can he really do that?" Dorimo shook his head and explained, "No, he can't. I've never heard of anybody that can do that. Maybe the Kage can do that, but other than that I don't believe he has the power to do it." Ibiki clapped his hands and said, "Your tests will now be given. Remember, if you are caught cheating, then you will be disqualified." The tests were then brought to each genin in the room, and the test began. XXX. Naruto sat exhausted as he finished his test. The questions were unbelievably hard, and Naruto tried so hard not to cheat. He had to relent, and when everybody finished the 9 questions, Ibiki gave out the 10th question. He had warned the genin that if anybody wanted to leave they should do it now, and they would be able to take the Chunin exams at a later date. More than half of the room left, and now only certain teams advanced. It had turned out that there wasn't really a 10th question, but it was a way to test one's resolve. Naruto looked around and noticed that all of Konoha's teams advanced, Gaara's team advanced, the Odo team advanced, one Kusa team advanced, and several IWA and Kiri teams were there as well. Even Kabuto's team advanced. They were now standing by the dubbed Forest of Death, which was being introduced by the scantily clad jounin named Anko Mitarashi. Naruto heard Kiba scoff at the introduction as he said loudly, "The Forest of Death, ha! I bet it's not even that scary. It's nothing me and Akamaru can't handle." Anko threw a kunai at Kiba's head with blinding speed, the kunai scraping Kiba's cheek, drawing blood. She suddenly appeared behind him and licked the blood off of Kiba's cheek, sending a shiver down the Inuzuka's spine. "Overconfidence. The forest will eat you alive," Anko said, and a Kusanine appeared behind her. Naruto felt off looking at the ninja and was put off when the ninja had Anko's kunai and held it by her tongue. "I'm guessing this is yours," the Kusanine said as she held out the kunai to Anko. If Anko was disturbed by the action, she didn't show it as she grabbed the kunai. "Thanks," she said as she pocketed the kunai. "But if you ever sneak up on me like that again, I'll have to kill you." The Kusanine only smiled in response as she slithered back to her team. Sai narrowed his eyes and muttered, "Watch out for her. She could be trouble." Dorimo nodded in response and Naruto glared at the Kusanine. Anko cleared her throat and explained, "In 5 minutes, you will receive a death waiver. If you sign this, you're agreeing that if you die, the leaf will not be responsible. Besides some of the other genin taking the test, nobody didn't really seem to care about the fact that they might die, as they lined up to receive the waiver. Anko continued, "You will receive either an earth or heaven scroll. You have 3 days to receive the second scroll and go to the tower. If you come in without the second scroll, you will be disqualified." Chuji groaned loudly and complained, "What about food? What will we do about food?" Anko only smiled and said, "The creatures in the forest will do nicely." Chuji groaned loudly again and rubbed his stomach, which served for Ino to yell at him. Naruto signed his waiver quickly, wanting to know the rules of the second exam, and groaned inwardly when Gaara walked up to him. Gaara said blandly, "I hope to see you in this quarter of the exam. I wish for your blood to splatter." Naruto stared at Gaara evenly and countered, "It might not be my blood that will be splattered, you should watch yourself." Gaara smiled darkly and Naruto felt Gaara's chakra rise as Gaara said, "No one has ever made me bleed. What makes you think you can?" Naruto rose to the challenge and his chakra rose as well, slightly higher than Gaara's. "I'm not your average shinobi, Gaara." Gaara's eyes seemed to change to a gold 4-starred shape as he growled, "We'll see, Naruto Uzumaki. We will see." His blonde-haired teammate walked up and grabbed Gaara's shoulder. "Gaara, do this later. We can't do that right now." Temari warned, but if Gaara was listening, he didn't show it as he continued to eye Naruto. Sai walked up and warned, "Naruto, we can finish this later. Picking a fight now is unwise." Dorimo walked up as well and stared down Gaara. Gaara only smiled more as he walked away without another word. Naruto sighed heavily and stated, "If he comes for me, I want you to leave him for me." Sai was about to protest, but Naruto continued, "He wants me. If you interfere, I don't know what he will do. Don't underestimate him, he's dangerous. He was like me when I was controlled." Sai nodded grimly and Dorimo nodded as well. Anko grinned evilly and said, "The second part of the Chunin exams is about to start. Ready yourselves." Every team grew serious and prepared for the go. "The second part has commenced. I hope you don't get killed." As soon as she said that, the teams rushed into the forest. Naruto said, "Go for the trees. We should get some distance into the forest before we start." Sai and Dorimo nodded in agreement and they jumped into the trees. XXX. An hour had passed since the start of the second part of the Chunin exams. Naruto, Sai, and Dorimo had set up in a position, but they had already decided to leave very soon. "We should make up a password," Dorimo said as Naruto looked at him quizzically. "For what?" Naruto asked. "In case one of us is separated and we need to establish if you're the real thing," Sai explained and Naruto nodded in understanding. "Who are the ones who protect the tree?" Dorimo asked and almost instantly Sai answered. "The unseen roots from the depths of the earth." Dorimo nodded content and they both turned to Naruto. "Naruto, who are the ones who protect the tree?" Dorimo asked. Naruto thought for a second and then answered, "The unseen roots from the depths of the earth." Dorimo nodded, and Naruto smiled happy with himself. Naruto suddenly shifted and Sai raised an eyebrow. Naruto chuckled sheepishly and said, "I need to go to the bathroom." Sai nodded and waved him away. Naruto ran off and ran behind a bush. They waited patiently and when Naruto came back, Sai said, "Who are the ones who protect the tree?" Naruto recited the answer quickly, and the team went on their way. XXX. Gaara stared at the Aimnin uninterested as they boasted about their skills. Kankuro yawned, which only served to make the Aimnin angry. One ninja grabbed his umbrella and shouted, "Ninja art! Sunbon shower!" The umbrella twirled in the air and released a shower of sunbon. Gaara didn't even flinch as sand rose up and covered Gaara in a cocoon of sand. The sunbon rained down on Gaara. The Aimnin laughed loudly and boasted, "You shouldn't have underestimated me, Sannin. I am Shigyur of the Aim village. Now your scroll is mine." Kankuro scoffed and said, "You thought that jutsu would kill Gaara. Don't make me laugh." As if on cue, Gaara emerged from the sand unharmed, and he rose his hand up, and the sand rushed towards Shigeru and wrapped around his body, and constricted. Shigeru struggled in vain as he tried to escape the sand. "PL? Please let me go," Shigeru begged, and Gaara didn't seem to care as he closed his fist, and the sand crushed Shigeru's body, blood and flesh splattering, hitting Shigeru's teammates. The sand caught the blood that would have landed on Gaara, and the remaining Aimnin panicked. One of them grabbed their scroll and rolled it towards Gaara. "We surrender. You have our scroll. Please let us go," the ninja begged. Gaara didn't even bat an eyelash at the boys' pleading as sand sped towards them and quickly crushed them. Kankuro walked to the scroll and picked it up. He smiled and said, "Great, it's the one we needed." Gaara stared at Kankuro blankly, which sent shivers down his spine. Gaara said, "Let's go," and walked away from the scene, leaving his siblings. They scrambled after Gaara, not wanting to keep him waiting. Meanwhile, in the bushes, Kiba, Hinata, and Shino were trembling. Kiba thought, he killed them like nothing. He didn't even care about the scroll, he just killed them. Akamaru was trembling inside Kiba's jacket, and Kiba tried desperately to calm the puppy down. Shino looked pale as he stated, "Now you know why I said it was unwise to reveal ourselves, Kiba." Kiba nodded frantically as he tried to keep the images of the bodies out of his head. XXX. Sasuke groaned inwardly, trying so desperately to drown out the voice that was Sakura's. Sasami chuckled inwardly and said, "Sakura, I think that Sasuke wants to be left alone." Sakura glared at Sasami and thought, "I know your game, Sasami. You're just trying to get Sasuke to notice you instead." Sasami rolled her eyes seeing Sakura staring at her and said, "All right, so I guess we should look for a team to target." Sasuke turned to Sasami, his attention fully on her. "I suggest we go after another Konoha group. We know more of their abilities, and we will be able to plan ahead based on their abilities." Sasuke nodded in agreement and responded, "Any of the Konoha teams will be easy to beat, but if we see Naruto's group, we do not engage." Seeing Sasami's confusion, he explained, "His sensei once told me that he has been trained specifically because he was needed. It would make sense if his teammates went under advanced training as well. They could very well be the most dangerous competition in the exams." Sasami nodded, and Sakura secretly admired Sasuke for his explanation. A voice, which sent shivers down Sasuke's spine, said, "The most dangerous competition? Why, I'm insulted." They turned around to see the Kusanine that was talking to Anko. She looked interestingly at Sasuke before continuing, "I believe I'm the most dangerous competition here." They tensed ready to engage when the Kusanine Teskade, as if chastising a child, and said darkly, "We can't have any of that." And suddenly Team 7 was hit with the Kusanine's chakra. It was so huge that it took most of their strength not to pass out. Sasuke growled, feeling the familiar malevolent feel of chakra, and smirked lightly and thought, "It's not as bad as Naruto's." Sasuke grabbed a kunai and thrust it into his thigh with a growl. He felt the effects leave him as he panted heavily. The Kusanine smiled and said, "Impressive, Sasuke, but it seems that your teammates aren't as resourceful. This'll be fun." And with a murderous smile, the ninja lunged. XXX. Naruto looked up abruptly and asked, "You guys feel that?" Sai and Dorimo nodded in confirmation while Naruto continued, "There's no way that chakra belongs to a genin." Sai asked, "Do you think that it belongs to Gaara?" Naruto shook his head and answered, "I felt Gaara's chakra. It was sinister, but not to this degree. To somebody else. Someone more powerful than Gaara." Dorimo nodded in agreement and asked, "Do you think we should check it out?" Naruto hesitated for a minute before nodded his head yes. They all nodded before heading towards the chakra was emanating. XXX. Team 7 was panting heavily on top of a tree. They were running for the past 30 minutes and they needed a break. Sasami growled impatiently and said through clenched teeth, "Why don't we take him? He's only one guy." Sasuke looked at Sasami incredulously and answered, "You didn't sense that guy's chakra? How he put us on the ground with the feel of his chakra alone. We would never be able to take him." Sakura whimpered slightly and started to shake. What do we do then, Sasuke? Sasuke panted for a few seconds and answered, truthfully, I say we just keep running until we lose him, or find a team that can help us. Sasami scowled and said, I still say we take our chances and fight him. She widened her eyes in shock when a voice behind her said, excellent. I would want nothing else. Fight me with all you have. She jumped back away from the Kusanine, who was twirling a kunai in his hand nonchalantly. Keep me entertained. Show me the leaf's power, the Kusanine drawled as she threw the kunai, which neared Sakura's face. Sakura didn't seem to register the weapon that neared her face, and Sasuke hastily caught the weapon. The kunai scraped against Sasuke's hand, and Sasuke gritted his teeth in pain. Sasami went through hand seals and breathed in a flux of air, wind style, great breakthrough, and blew a great force of air at the Kusanine. The Kusanine widened his eyes in shock as he was thrown back off the tree. He quickly regained his footing and landed on the ground on his feet gracefully. He chuckled darkly and complimented, a wind affinity, a rare affinity in the Leaf Village. This will definitely be interesting. Sasuke eyed his opponent as Sasami said, we can't just keep on running. Sooner or later we'll run out of energy. We won't be able to run then. Sasuke closed his eyes for a second before nodding in agreement. Sasami smirked and continued, if push comes to shove, we can always just run. Sasuke nodded again and jumped down, followed by Sasami. Sakura shivered before steeling her resolve slightly and jumped down as well. The Kusanine chuckled darkly and licked his lips, which sent more shivers down Sasuke's spine as he said, so you three have finally decided to fight. I hope you do not disappoint me. I will like to see what you could do before I kill you. Sasuke slid into a stance which was followed by Sasami. Sakura slid into the academy stance which was the only one she learned. The Kusanine opened his mouth, and out popped out a sword, which sent the three reeling as he said, before we get started I believe I should introduce myself. My name is… He looked at Sasuke with a hungry glare in his eyes before he finished, Orochimaru. Sasuke panted heavily as he tried desperately to keep himself upright. He was bleeding on his side, and he had cuts from when Orochimaru's sword had scraped him. He thought, what does this guy want? He could have already killed us 1,000,000 times over. Maybe he wants the scroll. Sasuke quickly reached into his back pants pocket and said, you want the scroll? Fine here. Take our scroll and leave us alone. Orochimaru looked taken aback for a second before quickly regaining his composure, and laughed darkly as he grabbed the scroll. Sasuke had hope in his eyes thinking that Orochimaru would leave, but his hopes were quickly dashed when Orochimaru grabbed the scroll and quickly burned it with a quick fire jutsu. Orochimaru said as he watched the scroll quickly turn to ash, I didn't think that you would give me the scroll. I also didn't think that you would honestly believe that after all this, I wanted your scroll. Sasuke widened his eye in shock and grabbed a spare kunai out of his pocket and threw it. Orochimaru lazily grabbed it and threw it back with blinding speed. Sasuke gasped as the kunai neared his face, and he thought, shit, it's too fast. I can't. Suddenly time seemed to slow as Sasuke grabbed the kunai with his right hand, and after spinning threw it back to Orochimaru. Orochimaru let the kunai graze his face as he complimented. So it seems your Sharingan has awakened. It won't do much, but it will make this more interesting than it has been. Sasuke shifted out of Orochimaru's vision, which surprised the Sannin, and Sasuke appeared behind him. Orochimaru drawled, it seems you're much faster, and blocked a punch that Sasuke threw. Sasuke countered with his other arm, and drove the Sannin back with a kunai. Sasuke back flipped away from Orochimaru and went through hand seals quickly, fire style, Phoenix Sage Fire Jutsu, and sent a volley of tiny fireballs hurtling towards Orochimaru. Orochimaru dodged the tiny fireballs and found himself backed up against a tree. He smirked lightly and said, impressive, you've backed me into a corner. Sasuke didn't respond as he threw shuriken around the tree. Orochimaru raised an eyebrow interested in the young Uchiha's tactic. Sasuke smirked confidently and raised his hand slightly, revealing a wire that was attached to the shuriken. Orochimaru widened his eyes in shock when he tried to move, but he couldn't. Sasuke lifted the wire up to his mouth and breathed a flux of fire that burned through the wire and quickly approached Orochimaru. Orochimaru didn't move a muscle as the fire reached his body and quickly burned him. Sasuke narrowed his eyes when he noticed that Orochimaru didn't even scream as the fire torched his body. Sasuke went through more hand seals and breathed, fire style, great fireball jutsu, and let out a giant fireball that collided with Orochimaru's still burning body. Sasuke breathed heavily and turned back to his unconscious teammates. He ran over to them and checked their pulses. He sighed in relief and thought, "They're still alive. Now I can focus on getting them out of here." He grabbed Sasami and Sakura and lifted them over his shoulders. He grunted in effort and nearly buckled over because of the combined weight. "Shit. I can't focus on their weight, I gotta get them out of here." He heard a familiar chuckle that sent shivers down his spine. "That was impressive, Sasuke. I've deemed you worthy of my gift." Sasuke turned back to see Orochimaru's burned body standing free, Sasuke's wires lying uselessly on the floor. Orochimaru looked at Sasuke with an insane glint in his eyes as he suddenly ripped his peeling face away, which nearly made Sasuke vomit. Under the face, another face peered at him. Sasuke was too perplexed to try and run, wondering what the hell this man was. Orochimaru's serpent-like eyes gleamed with a hunger that put Sasuke on edge. He dropped his teammates on the floor and thought, "I'm going to die. I can't die like this. I still haven't killed him." Orochimaru licked his lips with his extended tongue and said, "You are what I've been looking for. Now receive my gift." His neck suddenly extended until he was near Sasuke's neck. Sasuke only laid there defeated as Orochimaru opened his mouth, fangs elongated. Suddenly kunai lodged themselves into Orochimaru's neck and Orochimaru dropped. Sasuke looked surprised as Naruto, Sai, and Dorimo appeared next to him. Naruto crouched next to Sasuke and said, "Uchiha, are you okay?" Sasuke didn't immediately answer as he continued to lay there. Sai walked to Sasami and Sakura and checked their pulses. Dorimo kept his blade on Orochimaru and he was shaking slightly. Orochimaru's neck suddenly lurched, and Dorimo crouched into a stance, on guard. Spit suddenly flew from Orochimaru's mouth, as a body suddenly sprung from his mouth. Orochimaru charged towards Sasuke with his sword in hand, but Dorimo intercepted the attack. Dorimo growled, which surprised his teammates. "Orochimaru." Orochimaru turned his head sideways and asked, "Do I know you?" Which only infuriated Dorimo even further as he suddenly morphed into smoke and appeared behind Orochimaru and stabbed at his back. Orochimaru parried the attack and said, "Oh, now I remember. The Iburi clan, I thought they were extinct." Dorimo clenched his fists in anger as Orochimaru. What an interesting development. Naruto sat confused at Dorimo's behavior and decided to help him. He charged at Orochimaru and tried to sweep him. Orochimaru dodged the attack and sent Naruto back with a lazy punch to the gut. Naruto wheezed in pain and went to charge him again. Dorimo roared, "He's mine. You will not interfere." Naruto stopped and looked at Dorimo with confusion etched on his face. Dorimo turned to Orochimaru and growled, "You will pay for what you've done." Orochimaru only smirked in response and Dorimo charged him. Dorimo went through hand seals and breathed out a wave of smoke. The smoke rushed over Orochimaru and Orochimaru complimented, "Impressive. You've done more with your abilities than any of your other clansmen." Dorimo didn't respond as he morphed into his smoke form, blending with the wave of smoke. Orochimaru then said, "But wind is still your clan's weakness," and manipulated the wind and dispersed the smoke. Dorimo quickly reverted back to his solid form behind Orochimaru and morphed back to his smoke form. He suddenly launched into Orochimaru's mouth and nose. Orochimaru choked and grabbed his throat. Naruto saw his chance, and with Sai they both charged Orochimaru. Orochimaru opened his mouth, and another body slithered out of his mouth. Naruto growled in frustration and went through hand seals along with Sai. With a charge of ink lions, Naruto created a stampede of foxes made from fire that charged Orochimaru. Orochimaru shot out his arm, and snakes slithered from his sleeve and collided against the lions and foxes. Orochimaru summoned a snake that was 3 times the size of him, and the snake charged Naruto and Sai. Naruto sidestepped the snake and blew a fireball that singed the side of the snake. The snake hissed in pain, and with a speed that Naruto didn't anticipate, the snake plowed into Naruto, sending him through several trees. Naruto! Sai cried out in alarm as he dodged the snake. The snake sped towards Sai, and Sai cursed. He couldn't dodge the attack. Suddenly he was grabbed by Sasuke, who threw him sideways. Sasuke blew tiny fireballs that collided with the snake's face. The snake collided against a tree, hissing in pain. Sai nodded to Sasuke in thanks, and they charged Orochimaru, who was fighting Dorimo, who was struggling. Dorimo growled in their direction and said through his mask, "He is mine. I told you that." Neither of them responded as they engaged Orochimaru. Dorimo flipped in the air and ripped off his mask. A scar ran through his right eye, and his black eyes gleamed with fury. He spat out smoke that ran into Orochimaru's face, and Orochimaru closed his eyes, which gave Sai and Sasuke their chance. Sasuke blew a fireball point blank into Orochimaru's body, and Sai sent an eagle colliding Orochimaru. Orochimaru was sent back, but Dorimo didn't stop. His face was laced with hatred as he continued the attack. Orochimaru gritted his teeth and quickly summoned a 2-headed snake that charged Dorimo. Dorimo shifted through the snake in his smoke form and shifted immediately back to his solid form, and he continued his charge. Orochimaru smirked confidently and with blinding speed threw his sword at Dorimo. Dorimo didn't have time to dodge as the sword stabbed into his side. Dorimo stared wide-eyed at the sword that was edged into his side. Sai cried out, "Dorimo!" as Dorimo stumbled on his knees. Dorimo spit out blood as he tried desperately to get up. Orochimaru didn't waste any time as he ran at Sasuke. Sasuke threw a kunai in vain, as Orochimaru easily dodged the knife. As he neared Sasuke, he suddenly felt a malevolent chakra, then felt nothing but searing pain as a hand tore through his stomach. Orochimaru spat out blood as he turned to see Naruto growling at him. Naruto had fury edged on his face as he ripped his hand out of Orochimaru's stomach. Orochimaru gritted his teeth in pain as Naruto continued his assault. His chakra-infused fists smashed into Orochimaru as Sai checked on Dorimo. Sasuke got out of the way as Naruto barreled into the Sannin. Naruto roared, "Die!" as chakra started to form in his mouth. Orochimaru took advantage of the moment and quickly went through hand seals. Naruto was about to unleash the blast, but Orochimaru grabbed him and thrust his hand into his stomach, purple chakra lacing his fingers. Naruto suddenly felt the Kyuubi's chakra leave him as he clutched his stomach in pain. Orochimaru quickly opened his mouth, and another body quickly replaced his older one as he ran at Sasuke again. His neck extended, and with hunger etched on his face, he bit Sasuke's neck. Sasuke yelled out in pain as he collapsed, the curse mark quickly growing on his skin. Orochimaru laughed insanely. His work finally finished, and he said darkly, "You will look for me for power, Sasuke." He turned to Naruto and said, "You are more powerful than I anticipated. Your power is wasted on these leaf fools. If you weren't so loyal to the leaf, I would ask for you to join me." He suddenly disappeared, leaving the defeated Genins alone. Naruto tried to stay conscious as he heard Sai call his name. "Naruto, Dorimo is injured, help me. He's been poisoned." Naruto turned his head towards Dorimo and reached out his hand in vain as he thought, "Shit, Dorimo, I need." He couldn't finish his thought as he blacked out. XXX. It had been hours since Orochimaru defeated Team 7 and Ryu no Tsume. Sai had managed to get the poison out of Dorimo's system. Naruto and Sasuke had still not woken up after Orochimaru had done something to them. Sai couldn't place the seal that Orochimaru had placed on Sasuke. It looked oddly like the one that Danzo had placed on him and Dorimo, but he didn't know what the effects would be. Dorimo sat quietly by the fire that Sai had created. His face was solemn as he stared at the fire. Sai had been tending to Sasuke when he spoke. "This is my entire fault. When I saw Orochimaru, I just remembered the events that I had tried so hard to forget. Sai didn't look at Dorimo as he continued. I watched as that bastard tore through and slaughtered my clan. He killed them because he wanted our power. And my clan allowed him to experiment on us because he said he could stabilize the ability. Because of that, they're dead and Orochimaru used me to help him. Sai looked at Dorimo in shock and was about to ask why. Dorimo, seeing Sai's incredulous look, and grabbed his sleeve and ripped it off, revealing a mark on his upper arm. It resembled the mark on Sasuke's neck, but the tomos were reversed in their position, going outward instead of inward. Sai widened his eyes in shock as Dorimo said, "It did stabilize our powers, but it did other things. There were cases where my clan members would grow violent. Some went through transformations that would increase their bloodlust. Many of them were cut down, until there were none of them. Except for me." Dorimo rubbed his mark and gritted his teeth. "I was spared because I was the only one who didn't show such symptoms, not outwardly anyway. Where it didn't show physically, it showed mentally. I would hear voices that would tell me to kill and murder. I tried to keep the voices out, and I did for the most part." Dorimo sighed heavily and continued. "Then the day happened. Orochimaru had come for the final time. Where my clan had thought he would help them, he slaughtered them. Orochimaru had killed many of them, and there were those who had tried to escape. That's where I came in. For those that tried to escape, he had used my mark as a way to control me and bring out my transformation. I was a monster, a demon." Dorimo looked away in shame and Sai saw a tear go down his eye. Sai had never seen Dorimo cry before due to the training, but it seemed not even Danzo's training could completely destroy Dorimo's emotion. Dorimo sighed and turned back to the fire, wiping his eyes. A groan had alerted them and Sai and Dorimo to see Sasami and Sakura rubbing their heads in pain. Sasami asked groggily, "What happened?" "All I remember was fighting that Orochimaru guy, and all of a sudden I blacked out." Sakura looked at Sai and Dorimo, then turned to Sasuke's unconscious form and instantly ran over to him. Sasami rolled her eyes slightly and she asked, "You're the teammates of that Naruto Uzumaki guy, right?" Sai nodded and answered, "You guys were attacked by Orochimaru, one of the legendary Sannin, and it seems that Sasuke was his target. My team and me intercepted Orochimaru and tried to protect you and fight him. We managed to push him back, but not before he managed to get to Sasuke. He has managed to place some sort of seal on Sasuke. We do not know the seal's purpose, but we have an idea now." Sai looked at Dorimo for confirmation and he nodded. Sakura looked at Sai and asked, "What is the seal for? You just said you have an idea." Dorimo looked at Sakura and answered, "The seal, if it's like the one I've witnessed before, the seal will make Sasuke more bloodthirsty, and he will have the insatiable need to kill." Sakura gasped loudly, while Sasami widened her eyes in shock. As they conversed, they didn't realize that they were being watched. The Otonin had been watching them for a while and Dosu said, "So it seems that Lord Orochimaru had placed the seal on Sasuke." Zaku growled angrily and said, "Why wouldn't he tell us of this? Do you think that he was trying to get rid of us?" Dosu didn't answer immediately, which made Kin nervous. Dosu finally answered, "No, I believe that Orochimaru is testing Sasuke. If he wanted us dead, he would have done it himself. Sasuke has just received the mark, and the survival rate for the mark is low. If he survives, Orochimaru would want to test exactly how Sasuke would use it." Kin sighed in relief at the answer, much to the chagrin of Zaku, who voiced his complaints. Kin, ignoring Zaku, asked Dosu, "We can't attack them now. They succeeded in driving back Lord Orochimaru." Zaku scoffed in response and cracked his knuckles. "They don't seem all that tough. I say we can take them right now." Zaku whispered confidently and Kin rolled her eyes. Dosu shook his head and responded, "No. We'll wait. Our target is Sasuke. The more people there are, the more problems we'll have. We'll wait until those three are gone. Then we advanced." Kin nodded in agreement, and Zaku growled but nodded as well. They turned back to the teams and sat there, waiting for the chance to strike. XXX. Naruto groaned, seeing exactly where he was. The sewers. The home of the Kyuubi. He sighed heavily knowing that he wanted to leave, but he couldn't leave just yet. His eyes steeled in his resolve and he walked towards the room that had the demon in it. When he walked into the room, he found himself in front of a giant cage. What he saw at once was the purple chains that wrapped around the cage. He remembered the purple chakra that laced around his seal when Orochimaru attacked him. He tried to access the Kyuubi's chakra as a test, and the purple grew darker the harder he tried to access the demon's chakra. It blocks the connection between us, Naruto realized as he walked closer to the cage. He grabbed a chain and tried to pull. The chain wouldn't budge even when Naruto tried his hardest to pull it. Shit, I can't access his chakra, Naruto thought. Then suddenly a malevolent chuckle rang throughout the room. So my child, you finally return, the demonic voice drawled. Naruto didn't respond as the Kyuubi continued. It's a shame really. You were the perfect embodiment of me. Uncaring, dangerous, bloodthirsty, and heartless. You could have been more. Naruto growled in anger and retorted, I'm more than your puppet, demon. A dark laugh emitted from the cage which sent shivers down Naruto's spine. My puppet? No, you were more than that. You were my way of reminding this world that I was to be feared. You are a puppet, but just not mine. Naruto was surprised by the demon's response and confusion was etched on his face. Naruto's head was suddenly filled with insane laughs that he identified as his own. Naruto looked down at the watered floor and saw himself but not himself. This reflection had an insane smile on its face and bloodied teeth. Red hair replaced his blonde and red replaced his blue eyes. Naruto closed his eyes and heard a voice say, You're weak. You've let them change who you were. You need to snap out of it. Then a dark laugh filled his ears. Naruto looked at the cage and growled out, I'm a puppet? I'm not the original. The Kyuubi continued, I see I've confused you. I wonder, do you remember the Leaf's disciples' mission? The end when you reported to Danzo. Naruto looked down and tried to remember the memory, but only saw glimpses of the memory. He clutched his head when he heard muffled voices, mainly Danzo's. The Kyuubi chuckled madly and taunted, I see you don't. Only glimpses, I'm sure. Well, I would tell you exactly why, but it will be more fun when you found out yourself. I wonder what your response will be. Naruto looked at the cage and demanded, What are you talking about? What will I find out? Tell me. The Kyuubi only laughed darkly as a response, and suddenly the cage started to move away from Naruto. Naruto tried to reach out and he suddenly blacked out. Triple X. Naruto woke up with a gasp as his vision returned to him. He woke up and looked down at his hands and realized his claws were elongated. His fangs had elongated and his whiskers were darkened. He turned to Sai and Dorimo who were watching him cautiously, Dorimo's hand on his blade. Naruto asked, What happened? Where's Orochimaru? Dorimo let go of his blade and answered through gritted teeth. The snake got away. He managed to get to Sasuke, planting a mark on him. Naruto looked at Sasuke who was still unconscious. Naruto cursed quietly and sighed heavily. Sai looked at Sasami and Sakura and said, We still need a scroll. We need the Earth Scroll. Sasami nodded and responded, We need that as well. We also need a Heaven Scroll since it seems that Orochimaru took ours. Sai nodded and stated, So we'll need to get them. Naruto and Sasami go out and look for teams. We need those scrolls. I haven't been checking how many days have passed. We're gonna have to work fast if we wish to qualify for the next part. Naruto looked to protest, but Sai shook his head and continued. The threat is now gone. I don't believe that Orochimaru will be back. He had already got what he came for. Naruto looked unsure for a second before nodding and looked to Sasami. Sasami got up quickly and with Naruto, jumped into the trees. Meanwhile, the Otonins were trying to decide if they should attack now. Zaku was trying to go now. This is our chance, Dosu. With those two gone, the only ones who would pose a threat are the two boys. Kin could easily handle the pink-haired one, and if all things fail, Lord Orochimaru has provided us with the tools needed to win. Kin nodded in agreement and Dosu was quietly thinking about it. Zaka then said, We won't have another chance like this again. Dosu sighed deeply and looked towards Team 7 and Ryu no Tsum. He then said, "All right, we'll attack soon. Go to your positions. We need to be smart about this. We can't attack headfirst and recklessly." Zaku grinned darkly and Kin flicked a needle in her hand nonchalantly. Dosu behind his bandages grinned insanely and he thought, "We will see what you can do, Sasuke Uchiha." He absent-mindedly rubbed his neck and felt a pulse of chakra. He grimaced and thought, "We will see which of us is more powerful, Uchiha." XXX. Naruto and Sasami grinned confidently as they grabbed the scroll of the defeated team. Naruto said, "One earth scroll down, one more to go." Sasami nodded in agreement and thought for a minute. "Wait, who should get this, us or you?" Naruto looked down at the scroll for a second and then replied, "You guys should get it. You already need a heaven scroll. We'll go hunting for more." Sasami took the scroll from Naruto and said, "Thanks for that." Naruto only nodded in her direction and jumped into a nearby tree. Sasami followed after him. XXX. Sai looked at Sakura looking at Sasuke and he said, "What is your infatuation with the Uchiha? From what I could tell from your team's activity, he doesn't pay any attention to you at all." Sakura looked at Sai incredulously and she growled in his direction. Sai didn't seem fazed by the growl and Dorimo looked out into the forest with eyes narrowed. "Sai, come here." Dorimo called Sai, who walked over to him and crouched by him. "What is it, Dorimo?" "I felt a chakra presence nearby, but as soon as it appeared it disappeared. Did you sense it?" "No, I didn't sense it, but I've been exhausted lately." "Well, I don't feel it anymore. It could be nothing, but then it could be something." Sai looked at Dorimo and he stared out into the forest. "What did it feel like? The chakra?" Dorimo narrowed his eyes and he growled out, "It had the chakra of Orochimaru, but it wasn't like him at all. It seemed like there was two different presences." Sai widened his eyes in shock and he whispered, "Do you think it could have been a follower of Orochimaru?" Dorimo shook his head and answered, "I have no idea, but I suggest we stay conscious." As soon as he said that, sound waves washed over them. Dorimo grimaced in pain as he felt a ringing sensation in his ears. He covered his ears in pain, and he tried desperately to figure out where the sound was coming from. Sakura cried out in pain as the sound waves ripped through her eardrums. Sai grimaced in pain as he held his ears. He looked wildly around trying to find out where the sound waves were coming from. A kunai embedded itself in his shoulder and he crouched over in pain. "Shit, I'm completely defenseless," Sai thought as he tried to fight to stay conscious. Another kunai was thrown and it quickly made its way to Dorimo. Dorimo tried to grab his blade, but cringed violently when the sound waves attacked his ear, dropping his blade as he covered his ears again. The sound waves stopped and a chuckle was heard. Sai looked up in pain as the Otonines stood before them. Dorimo growled in pain as he tried to grab his blade once again. Dosu clicked his tongue and said, "I don't think so. We can't have any of that." Then Zaka grinned darkly and held out his hands. The Leaf Ninja's ears were assaulted with sound once again, as they writhed on the floor in pain. Dosu continued, "We've come here for the Uchiha. As long as you cooperate, then you will get out of this alive, if not well." Kin walked towards Sakura and grabbed a needle from out of her pouch. She held the needle by her throat and hoisted her up. Sakura struggled in vain as Kin dragged her in front of Dorimo and Sai. She uncovered Sakura's ears with a dark smirk, and Zaku focused the blast in Sakura's face. Sakura writhed in pain as the sound assaulted her ears. She tried so hard to get away as the sound waves erupted in her ears. She screamed in agony as blood flowed out of her ear. Sai got up but was quickly attacked by sound waves as Dosu gave him a look that said, "Don't even try it." Dorimo growled in anger as Sakura fainted with blood leaking out her ears. Zaku turned to Sai and Dorimo and he laughed darkly. "Oh, don't worry. She's not dead." "Well, not yet anyway." Dorimo looked at them darkly and he said, "You're with Orochimaru, aren't you? I sensed his chakra mixed with yours. How is that possible?" Zaku chuckled darkly and said, I think that you know the answer to that, the way his chakra is mixed with yours. His answer caused Dorimo to widen his eyes in shock, and he rubbed his arm subconsciously. You have his curse mark. You really are his followers. Zaku grinned evilly and focused his sound waves to Dorimo. Dorimo screamed in pain as he collapsed on the floor. Sai looked down in anger and tried to keep his emotions in check. Dosu turned to Sasuke and said, Kin, finish him off. He probably won't survive anyway. Kin nodded and walked over to Sasuke and held a needle under his neck. Dorimo looked at Dosu in shock mixed with pain, and he gritted his teeth and said, What are you talking about? Dosu turned to Dorimo and answered, The curse mark has a low survival rate, the new one that Orochimaru created anyway. From what I could tell, he had an old one. Dorimo turned to Sasuke and thought, Shit, after all this, the Uchiha might not even survive this? Sai growled out, Wait, you don't have to do this. Zaku laughed darkly and retorted, We don't have to. Kin gripped the needle tighter as she prepared to cut his throat. But we want to. Suddenly, a dark chakra flooded over the area and dark marks ran over Sasuke. Sasuke chuckled darkly while his eyes were closed, which sent chills down Dorimo and Sai's spine. It reminded them of Naruto's past behavior. Kin froze, and that was all it took. Sasuke suddenly lifted himself up and grabbed Kin by the throat. Kin struggled against his grip and looked into Sasuke's eyes. His eyes held an insane gleam as he laughed madly. Kill. I'll kill you. Zaku blasted Sasuke with a sound wave, and Sasuke shifted out of the way and Kin was hit with the blast. She fell backward, and Sasuke said darkly, You missed.